Hi everybody! Yeah, I'm sorry. I had words and then I forgot the words, so I'm like, you know what? Just stop right there. Anyways, let us get back to Fujieda. When the clinic closed for lunch break, there came a small knock at my door, and Ray timidly walked in because he's afraid you're gonna attack him.
と、久しぶりにトワの部屋でご飯でも食べようかなって思って。
He held up the paper bag in his hand. I could see the local bakery's logo on the front.
どう?
Just a little down. Sorry, I was checking the audio. He fixed me with an inquiring look. Wow. I answered curtly, then sat down on the sofa. Okay, but are you actually gonna eat though? I wasn't really in the mood to talk to anyone, but I didn't have the energy to shoot him down. He cleared his space on the messy coffee table and set a plate down. Then he set out all the pastries and sat in the chair across from me.
また全然ご飯食べてないんでしょう。少し無理してでも食べた方がいいわ。
あの懐中時計。
When I finally spoke up, Ray flinched and froze in place.
お前が部屋に転がってるのを見つけて、ユーフォリアって刻印のことを俺に話したんだよな。
ええ、そうね。
Retracing my memories, I continued.
絵を描く時の名前をユーフォリアにしたらどうかって言ったのもお前だ。
そうよ。でも私、同じ名前のお店があるなんて知らなかったわ。
Flustered, he shook his head in protest.
別にお前を疑ってるわけじゃない。
Nodding, he slumped his shoulders.
あの時計、あの人が持ってっちゃったのよね。大切なものなのに。
大切なもの?
I looked at him suspiciously, and his expression shifted dramatically. Ooh, you know something and didn't tell us? Ray, not you too. Oh, I can't trust nobody here, can I? Damn, it's always been me, myself, and I, huh? His smoke changed colors and started swaying faintly. He was hiding something. I narrowed my eye.
どういう意味だ?
それは、だって、大切でしょ?
俺はあれが大切だなんて言ったことはない。
でも、
What? Ray was panicked to the point of tears. Then, finally, he gave in and looked back at me.
前に、さっきの人がルーストに来た時、ユーフォリアって名前にやけに食いついてきたって話したじゃない?
Well, at least with Ray. He will tell you, it's just gonna take a little prodding. But Taku, he'd be like, nah, I'd rather burn your mail than tell you what the hell's going on.
ユーフォリアって聞いたら、思い出すのは懐中時計だったから、タクに聞いたの。あの時計、何か大事なものなのかしらって。
Okay, so he himself didn't know, he just asked about it.
そしたら、あの時計は、トアのお母さんの形見なんだって言われて。でも、トアには黙っておいてほしいって言われてたの。覚えてないなら、その方がいいからって。
And you listened to Taku of all people after I told you he burned my mail? Ray, no.
それって、本当にいいのかなっていう疑問はあったの。お母さんの形見なのにって。黙っていて、ごめんなさい。
He closed his eyes in shame. Apparently the pocket watch was a memento of my mother's. I had no emotional reaction to this information. Of course, it was pretty ironic that I'd named myself Euphoria after an engraving on my mother's watch. But what if the establishment called Euphoria? I'm telling you. Okay, so I know I didn't mention this in like the ending of my previous video, but like literally afterwards, I was sitting there, I was like, wait a minute, what if what Towa's doing is exactly what his mom was doing? Making people's darkest desires come true. You know? That could be it, and he's basically continuing what she was doing without even knowing it. Was there some connection between the two?
ね、よかったらパン食べてね。少しでもいいから。
Breaking the heavy silence, Ray smiled awkwardly and tapped the plate of pastries.
それと今日お店でクリスマスパーティーがあるの。無理にとは言わないけど、大丈夫そうならトワも来てね。
I had no interest in the party itself, but all the Roost regulars were invited each year, including the people Fujieda spoke about me. Wait. Including the people Fujieda spoke to about me. There we go. I nodded, and Ray donned a relieved smile.
待ってるわ。
The party was tonight. I slowly pushed myself up from my reclined position against the sofa. Then I grabbed the closest pastry and took a small bite. At this, Ray's smile brightened all the more. But I wasn't suddenly hungry or anything. I just knew I might need the energy for later, so I figured I'd stock up. Bro, what do you plan to be doing? Fist fighting? Slowly, I chewed the pastry without even tasting it. How do you chew without tasting? It's kind of like an oxymoron. As I zoned out smoking and watching TV, the dark of night set in. But there was still time before the Christmas party, which means exploration! Maybe I'll go kill time somewhere. I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray, rose to my feet, and pulled on my coat. Hell yeah. I love exploration. Alright, not many places. But yeah, we didn't get Inada. I was like, what? I sensed someone's gate. It's him, isn't it? It's him, isn't it? It's him, isn't it? I knew it. I got happy way too soon. Hi, honey. I think. Okay. What the fuck? What? That's Madarame. It's Madarame. Unrelated, but the party. Mm-hmm. don't know. This is sudden. What do you mean? I mean, what do you want to know, Hinata? Hmm? Huh. I mean, I suppose. What are you looking for? Please! I need to know who. Oh.
それじゃ
Oh, but we're not gonna get. Okay, fine. Whatever. Whatever. I guess we'll never know who the hell he fucking is. Like, all this time. Finally up to the last chapter, and we still don't know who he is. Bestie! But sorry. I tell you, whenever I see him, I get really happy. I just love him so much. But it's like, can we like get more information about Inada? Like, come on now. It's the last chapter. What? What am I looking at? No. Okay. It's usually a oh yeah.
どういうことだ
And bro's like, oh yeah, it happens from time to time.
もちろんです。
ネガティブに
嬉しいです。
Yeah. Right?
ではでは。
My bestie. I miss you already. Who's here?
Towa だ。
Oh, they're together this time. Oh, that's why they're together.
聞いてよ。
Hmm?
ふん
どうやら。
What is his home country? What? Wow, okay. Uh, Laura didn't know I needed to know?
まあな。
You know what? That's fair. That's fair. Right? Right? Like, I'm with Towa. It's like, whoa. Oh, this is information I never knew.
それで
Wasn't he born here?
ポジティブに
Yeah, I was about to say. Wasn't he born here?
だよな。
Is she Komi?
なになに
Yeah.
わからね
Yeah. Aww.
マジかよ。
Yeah, I think you might want a second opinion. Oh, I did not expect him to ask about it. Wait, why didn't he ask Eiichi? He's literally the best person to ask about that.
どういうことだ? さあね。またな。
It must have been like a a super secret place. Only the VIPs of the VIPs can go to, you know? Because you also have to consider, it was Maya's establishment, right? And Maya was the Takasato Gumi leader. Takasato Gumi's leader's wife. And obviously, there was some stuff the Takasato Gumi did not want getting out, and that would probably include whatever his wife was doing, you know? Because obviously people were going to look at it unfavorably, considering what she was allowing to happen in that establishment, letting people. Wait, what? I'm sorry, I was so busy talking. I thought Ray was gonna stop, but I guess not. So yeah, obviously he doesn't want that getting out about, you know, his wife allowing such inhumane acts to happen against children and other people. Let me look at the backlog real quick. Oh. Okay. Okay, so he wasn't gonna stop. Ray was going somewhere. We don't know, but somewhere. Okay. I think we've explored everywhere, right? And so, I headed off to the Christmas party at Roost. Unsurprisingly, I found the place decked out in Christmas decorations and packed full of party guests. Due to my continued poor health, it all felt even more cloying than usual, stabbing into my eye and ears. The room was full of people's smoke, whirling together in a hideous rainbow of colors. The guests and employees were all wearing different costumes, talking and drinking merrily. I slipped through the crowd and made my way to the counter.
Merry Christmas.
The manager smiled at me from behind the counter, wearing a Santa hat.
どうしたの? 顔色が悪いけど。
人混みは苦手だ。
At this, his smile stiffened.
苦手なのに毎年来てくれてありがとう。注文はお任せでいい?
ああ。
He said about making my drink. I sat down, lit a cigarette, and after I took a long drag, I felt my irritable mood improve a bit. As I exhaled, I looked around the bar. The regulars were all crowded around the tables, wearing flashy costumes. I took another drag and contemplated whether to go ask him about Fujieda. Then my drink arrived.
お待たせ。
I inclined my head, took my drink in one hand, then pitched my cigarette between my fingers with the other. But before I could take a step, I spotted two familiar faces heading my way.
メリークリスマスとは
Junko!
ピーホリデー
Honami! It was Junko and Honami.
今日はレイがお休みで残念だけど楽しんでいってよね
Okay, so where was he going? Was he going to ask Fujieda for it back?
レイが休み
The two of them exchanged a glance.
あら聞いてないの今日はお休みするって連絡があったのよレイ毎年すっごくパーティーを楽しみにしてるのにほんと残念よねレイの分も楽しんでいってねどうは
Sus. Greeting, they walked off to talk to the other guests. Ray wasn't at this party, but he was the one who invited me here. Did he get sick or something? Remember Towa? You saw him? Well, then again, they can't exactly say that, because, you know, there are some people who just straight up, like, not go to all the places, so they wouldn't know that. Thinking back to our interaction at lunchtime, I made my way across the crowded room to the equally crowded tables.
いや
I called out with a smile, and a group of regulars looked up at me. One of them I'd spoken to a handful of times in the past. His eyes sparkled gleefully at me.
あれトワ君だ
Okay.
メリークリスマス
どうしたの珍しいねトワ君から声かけてくるなんて
True.
みんな盛り上がってるしたまには変わったことでもしようかと思って
You damn liar. Squinting, I took a drag of my cigarette and exhaled the smoke with a faint smile.
いいねいいねせっかくのクリスマスだしね乾杯
Kanpai. Following the flow of the conversation, I clinked my glass with his and took a sip.
あ店長おかわりお願いします
今だから言っちゃうんだけどさトワ君って妙な色気があるね
俺にあんた傷フェチなの
いやまあこんな店に通ってるんだし傷は別に嫌いじゃないよ
True.
でもそういうの抜きにしてもトワ君に流し目で見られるとちょっとドキッとしちゃうみたい
Brother.
謎が多い感じするもんな暴いてみたくなるような雰囲気はあるよね
That's the thing. He doesn't even know himself.
ほらトワ君って割と誰でも OK なんでしょ
He whispered, smirking.
気分が乗ればな
I call it pee. You know what?
その話マジなんだじゃあ俺にもチャンスある男は未経験だけど興味はあるんだよな
He said, but I'm curious.
そういう気分の時だったら相手するよ
マジか
After I shrugged off his drunken advances, I decided to cut to the chase.
ところで聞きたいことがあるんだけど
何
スーツを着た硬そうな男のこと覚えてるか店に来たんだろ
At this, the regulars all nodded.
ああ覚えてるよトワ君のファンってやつでしょ
In a way,
なんでこんな店に来るんだって感じの人ね
right?
そいつ俺について聞き回ってたんだって
そうそういろいろ聞かれたよトワ君あの人に何かしたの
何もただその男はユーフォリアって名前の店を探してるらしい
それってトワ君と同じ名前だね
ああだから俺のことを聞いて回ってたのかと思って
同じ名前の店ね
そんな店あったっけ？俺知らないな。
俺も
I'm telling you, his dad kept it in wraps.
会員制の高級クラブの名前だね。
See? Of course he knows. I looked over and saw the manager standing there, holding a drink.
はい、おかわり。
He took the empty glass off the table and replaced it with the new glass.
あ、どうも。
店長、知ってるのか？
ああ、うん。Aトックがまだ元気だった頃、一部では有名な店だったんだよ。昔から新興民に住んでる人なら知ってるんじゃないかな。当時、高里組がやってる店の中でもかなり人気があったらしいから。ユーフォリア、意味は多幸株だね。まあ、特別珍しい言葉でもないし、名前が被ることもあると思うよ。
With that, the manager walked back behind the counter. I raised my cigarette to my lips and wordlessly turned away from the regulars.
あれトワ君トイレ
Why did he say it like that? Instead of answering, I walked back to my seat at the counter. According to the manager, Euphoria was a members-only luxury nightclub located in District A. I remember Taro was like, yo, I was cleaning up this nightclub. Right? And he said he found the picture of Maya in it when he was cleaning out the place. Huh. Was my mother involved somehow? Of course she was. She owned it. Sorry. If the place was as popular as the manager claimed, then information about it would be easy to come by. And yet, Fujieda was having to go to such great lengths to dig up anything. Or was he investigating something else? If he worked for the Takasato Gumi, then surely he had access to all the information he needed, unless somebody threw it away, earned it. Maybe I should ask Sakaki. I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray and downed my drink. Then I pulled out my wallet, grabbed a few bills at random, and plunked them down on the counter.
ああ、トワ君、ちょっと待って。
What's up? Before I could leave, however, the manager flagged me down.
これ、トワ君に渡してくれって頼まれたんだけど。
By who? He handed me something, and I took it. Oh, Madarame, no. No, I don't need you right now. No, go away. A grimy red and silver Zippo lighter. For a moment, my breath faltered.
これ、誰が持ってきたんだ？
I asked quietly without looking up from the lighter.
名前は聞かなかったんだ。ごめん。でも、見たことのない人だったよ。
I never thought I'd see this thing ever again. It was a gift from Madarame. But Madarame died a long time ago. So, what was it doing here?
トワ君？
Don't you love it when the past keeps coming back down on you? The manager's voice brought me back to my senses. Stuffed the lighter into my pocket and spun on my heel. Then I walked straight to the door and left the bar. And even as the sound of chatter faded, sickening holiday cheer still clogged the air. I turned down a dark, shadowy alley in the direction of the clinic. Back at my place, I pulled off my coat and lay down on the sofa. Then I switched on the TV and closed my eye. Madarame's lighter flickered through my mind, but I shook it from my mind by thinking instead of everything that had happened lately. Euphoria, the nightclub that shared my name, that my mother was involved with. Ikuina and Asakura, two figures from my past that I coincidentally could no longer speak to. Not to mention the ever-elusive Kirihara Nozumu. And the mystery packages containing fragments of my past. Who kept sending them? And for what purpose? What was Fujieda investigating? With a sigh, I rose from the sofa, grabbed my coat, and pulled out my phone. Then I placed a call to Sakaki. I waited for a while as it rang, but when it became clear he wasn't going to answer, I reluctantly hung up again. After I tossed my phone onto the sofa, I grabbed a blistered bag of sleeping pills and popped one into my mouth. Then I grabbed the floor bottle, washed it down with a swig of booze, and laid back down. I knew sleep would probably bring more nightmares of my past. Normally, I always forgot the details by the time I woke up, but now I was hoping to remember. To think I was trying to have nightmares on purpose. Scoffing at myself, I closed my eye and waited for sleep to come. Are we back in the cage? Fire. No, just fire red. The room was illuminated in brilliant scarlet. Someone was standing in front of me. But they were silhouetted by the light, so I couldn't see their face. With the fiery red light behind them, the figure gazed down at me silently. For some reason, my heart trembled. I felt like crying, but I didn't know why. Was it somebody else who heard him? Do we know anybody with that eye color? I don't think so, yeah? Me trying to search my memories. Sure enough, I had a nightmare, then woke up the next day feeling like shit. Nausea and a migraine right out of the gate. I grimaced in pain. But this time, I remembered my dream quite vividly. I was in a fiery red room, and a woman was standing there with me. Oh, a woman. Maya? I didn't get a good look at her face, but I could vaguely tell she had soft features. And yet, I instinctively feared her. Why? My head began to ache sharply. When I tried to remember more, the nausea intensified, and I raced to the bathroom. I puked into the toilet and staggered to the sink to gargle and wash my face. Back in the living room, I pulled a bottle of booze from the fridge and returned to the sofa, sipping occasionally. I set the bottle on the floor, then lit a cigarette. The nausea had receded, but the headache was still very much there. I grabbed my phone and checked the screen. I had received an email from Taku explaining that the clinic would be closed today for personal reasons. The fact that he couldn't come tell me in person was proof of just how busy he was. Personally, this suited me fine, because I was planning to go visit Sakaki today. Just in case, I decided I'd give him a call in advance, but just then my phone buzzed. Conveniently, it was Sakaki calling.
はい。
とは起きてたか。昨日の夜着信があったからよ。どうした？
聞きたいことがある。今からそっちへ行ってもいいか。
ああ、と言っても事務所にはいねえぞ。
どこにいるんだよ。
Right.
教会だ。
Okay. He was probably referring to Shinkoumi Cathedral.
すぐに行く。
I hung up and then immediately rose to my feet, grabbed my coat, and left the room. I haven't been here in a hot minute. I arrived at the cathedral beneath a sky full of dull gray clouds. I couldn't sense anyone nearby, just the dry scratching of leaves as the wind blew them down the road. So, I walked to the entrance and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the vaulted ceiling. The only light source was the dim glow of the candles scattered all around. The pews were lined up in perfectly spaced rows, and at the very front, a man stood with his back turned, looking up at the crucifix on the far wall. When I approached, he looked over his shoulder at me. It was Sakaki.
よ、なんだ。
I didn't think you were religious. He shot me a suspicious look.
いつにも増して不健康そうな面してるな。どうせまた酒ばっか飲んでるんだろ。
No.
夢見が悪いんだよ。
夢見？悪夢でも見るのか？
Yeah.
ああ、多分母親の。
At this, his expression stiffened. But he quickly turned back to the crucifix.
あんた信者だったのか。
信者？
Yeah,
なんでこんなところにいるんだよ。
exactly.
今日はある人の命日でな。祈りを捧げたくなったんだ。
With that, he looked back at me. His expression was relaxed again, and he was smiling softly.
で、聞きたいことってなんだ？
Hanarome's alive, isn't he? I stared into his eyes point blank.
母親について知りたい。
That too. At this, he furrowed his brow slightly, like a concerned parent. Then he slowly nodded.
そうか。少しずつ
Again?
してきてるのか。
There was a time in the past where he was remembering before?
俺の部屋にある懐中時計は母親の形見らしいな。
その話は誰から聞いた？
I heard it from Ray, who heard it from Daku.
タクだよ。
Or you could just say that.
それで？
時計に刻まれたユーフォリアって文字。あんたはその意味を知ってるのか？
Fujieda had made some suggestive comment about the nightclub, but were they actually connected?
知ってるぞ。
Sakaki nodded, smiling.
ユーフォリアってのはお前の母親がやってた店の名前だ。
Yay, we got the pieces placed together.
母親がやってた店。
ああ、あの懐中時計は開店記念で配られたノベルティなんだ。
He chuckled in amusement.
いや、偶然とはいえ、まさかお前が母親の店と同じ名前を名乗るなんてな。その話を聞いたときは、さすがに運命を感じたよ。やっぱり親子ってのは似るもんなんだってな。
See, guys, I was onto something. He smiled in delight. I gazed back silently.
他にも何か思い出したのか？
No.
まだ聞きたいことがある。
なんだ？
まだらめのことだ。
Instantly, Sakaki's lips curled in a frown.
その話はあまりしたくねえな。 ったことだ。まだらめも加賀も死んだ。今さら掘り返しても何にもならねえだろ。
As I listened, I watched his smoke. It kept swaying and changing colors restlessly, suggesting his composure was merely an outward facade. On the inside, he was flustered. He was probably hiding something, but I knew no amount of badgering would get him to tell me.
それ以外の話なら聞くぞ。
じゃあ藤枝は？
藤枝？弁護士か。あいつがお前のところへ行ったってんだ。
Akaki frowned.
あんたがやったんじゃないのか？
Yeah, I thought you saw him too. Do you not have a leash on this man? Ooh.
俺は知らねえぞ。
His smoke didn't waver. Apparently, he wasn't lying. In other words, Fujieda wasn't acting on Sakaki's orders. Was he working alone?
まあ、あんまり勝手なことはするなって言っとかねえとな。
With a sigh, Sakaki smiled and looked back at me.
それにしても、お前が母親のことを思い出してくれて、心底嬉しいんだ、俺は。
Not when she's evil.
今日はある人の命日だって言っただろう。お前の母親の命日なんだよ。
Uh-oh. Just then, my vision began to sway.
今日ここでこうしてお前と母親の話ができるなんてな。運命としか言いようがねえ。なあ、とは。
He called my name in a solemn voice. I looked at him.
いろいろと気になることはあるだろうが、大丈夫だ。心配するな。
What does that mean?
すべていい方へ向かう。
He walked up to me and clapped me on the shoulders with both hands. My sight dimmed and an intense wave of nausea shot up. Reflexively, I pushed him backwards.
おい、大丈夫か、お前。
He started to approach, but I held up a hand to stop him. Then I stumbled to the door. I could hear that same voice again. Don't remember. Don't dig any deeper. Despite puking, I still felt sick. Discomfort wriggled in my gut. So, I left the church and staggered back home to the clinic. Drama's a bitch, eh? When I got home, I flopped down on the sofa and didn't get up until the sky was dark. The headache was still there, but the nausea was gone, so I decided to take a quick shower and head to roost. Arriving at roost, I walked to the counter and sat down.
Towa君、いらっしゃい。お任せ。
ああ。
Following our usual exchange, the manager got started on my drink. I pulled my cigarettes and lighter out of my coat pocket and slid one between my lips. The more I kept digging, the more questions I had. And it felt like I was straying further and further from the answers I wanted. As I lit my cigarette, the manager set my drink down on the counter. I set my cig in the ashtray, grabbed the glass, and thought back to what Sakaki said to me. Now I had confirmation that Euphoria was the name of my mother's business. And Sakaki didn't seem to know about Fujieda sniffing around either. If he was working alone, then he had to have some sort of personal motive. Before I knew it, my glass was empty. I raised it at the manager to ask for another. Then, as I was taking a drag, someone plopped down next to me.
こんばんは、トワさん。
Hi! It was Eiji, and evidently he was alone.
店長、モスコミュールをください。トワさんは？
Oh, maybe he didn't ask in the exploration because he's gonna ask here.
もう頼んだ。
The manager set another drink down in front of me. I crushed my cigarette in the ashtray, then grabbed my glass.
あ、そういえば桐原なんですけど、ちょっと残念なお知らせです。
What happened to Nozomu? What happened to him? As I sipped my new drink, I looked over at him and waited for him to continue.
亡くなってました。トラックにひかれたそうで。
Yeah. Ooh, poor thing. For a moment, I froze. Then I set my drink down on the counter. Ikuina... How do I want to say this? Ikuina offed himself. Asakura was in a coma, and now Kirihara Nozumu had died in an accident. Well, if you can call it an accident, I'm pretty sure somebody actually did it to him. But, you know, that's just speculation. Plus, his older brother from the headshots had left the world as well. Now I couldn't ask a single one of them about my past. Then the manager set a drink in front of Eiji.
ありがとうございます。桐原望はクリシュナというカフェでバイトしてたみたいですね。
Mm-hmm.
少し頼りない感じのある真面目な青年だったらしいです。あと調べてるうちに分かったことなんですが、どうも怪しい集団とつるんでたみたいで。
Wasn't he like the leader of the party?
怪しい集団。
はい。それが事故と関係してるのかは分かりませんが。ま、人間何で死ぬかなんて誰にも分からないですしね。
Yes, Eiichi. I watched out of the corner of my eye as he shrugged and took a sip of his drink. Eiji specialized in all types of information gathering. It stood to reason that he might know something about Fujieda and or my mother's business.
ユーフォリアって店知ってるか？
At the sudden question, he whipped his head around to look at me.
それ、他の人にも聞かれましたよ。藤枝さんっていう弁護士さんなんですけど。
Fujieda even managed to ask Eiji?
あと、トワさんのこともいろいろ聞かれました。藤枝さんとお知り合いなんですか？
No.
知り合いってわけじゃない。
Right, like, I wouldn't go that far.
あ、じゃあ、顔見知りとか、そんな感じですか？
Wouldn't go that far either.
まあ、そのお店のことはなんとなくしか聞いたことがなかったんで、軽く調べてみたんですよ。でも記録が全然残ってなくて。
Because that's just how fucked up it was.
結構有名な高級クラブだったみたいですね。表だって怪しいところは特になさそうな普通のキャバクラです。
Okay, but you don't know what was going on behind the curtains. Like, sure, like there are a lot of businesses that have like actual like a legit business running in the front, but then in the back, if you know, you know, you know.
でも表面的には普通ってだけで、全く怪しくないってことはないと思います。むしろ綺麗すぎて逆に怪しさ満点って感じで。
Exactly.
藤枝はそのごく普通のキャバクラを調べてる。雇い主を無視して単独でな。
それ、僕も気になったから本人に聞いてみたんですよ。榊さんは知ってるんですかって。
なんて言ってた？
教えてもらえませんでした。すっごい嫌な顔されちゃって。
Which means no, he is going against orders.
でもこの話、なんだかちょっとミステリアスで面白そうですよね。僕も個人的に少し調べてみようかな。
Wait a minute, I just realized. We've never seen Eiji's eyes. All this time, and I'm just now saying, like, realizing this. His tone suggested he was eager to play a fun new game, but then he looked at me intently.
ただ、多分これってた 高里組と新興民の闇につながってると思うんです。
I wonder what color his eyes are.
だからもしかしたら今までみたいにいろいろと教えることができなくなるかもしれません。僕の身も危なくなるかもしれないんで。
Yeah. He spoke in a theatrically yet low voice and chuckled.
ま、高里組に迷惑がかかるようなことはしませんけどね。念のために他の人には内緒にしておいてください。
Keep what to myself. I didn't hear
その代わり
anything.
トワさんの依頼は優先して聞きますし、何か知りたいことがあったら情報も提供します。
See, guys, I told you he's a real one. Well, I know. He's mostly just in it for himself, but... Yo. I'm telling you, he's a real one. He smiled mischievously, but then he cocked his head like he just thought of something.
トワさん、遠野さんってどうしてるか知ってます？
Well...
いや、
ここのところさっぱり姿を見なくて。っていうか、遠野さんもですけど、榊さん、今すごく警戒してるんですよ。
Well...
実質榊さんが組長みたいな感じになっちゃってるから、面白く思ってない連中も当然いますし。それにほら、聞いたことあります？ある幽霊の噂。
My smile stiffened slightly.
その幽霊の正体っていうのが例の構想に関係してる人なんです。トワさんがよく知ってる人ですよ。もしその幽霊が生きてたとしたらどうします？
This is a man speaking like he knows stuff. That's because he does, but, you know, he's just testing the waters. I looked away, evading his pointed gaze.
どうもしない。
そもそもその幽霊の存在を信じます？
冗談だろ。
I scoffed at him. But then that red and silver Zippo lighter rose up in the back of my mind. Eiji gazed back at me, smiled, and wordlessly raised his glass to his lips. As for me, I lit another cigarette and took a long, slow drag. The nicotine felt unusually bitter on my tongue, so I only took a few more puffs before crushing it in the ashtray. I left Roost and walked down the dark street, breathing in the night air. Eiji said he had an errand to run, so he left ahead of me. And I got drunk and now my brain was fuzzy from the booze. So many questions and absolutely no answers. Dark emotions built in my chest. I was so confused and I felt sick, and my head ached. I felt like every inch of my body was filled with sludge, and it made me wish someone would just hurt me. Okay. Gotta calm down there a little bit, Towa. My brain was rotting in my skull. Anyone would do. I just need to get it out of my system. When I looked up, I realized there were a few people standing idly around. Come to think of it, this area was known colloquially as the street. People of all ages and genders came here to turn tricks. At one point, I tried standing on a corner around here, purely out of curiosity. But coming all this way was such a hassle, I didn't last long. He really is the try anything guy. The people here wore a variety of outfits, from modest to provocative. I paused to take in the sights around me. But right as I was about to keep walking, I felt a gaze and looked over. An unfamiliar man was looking at me, and when our eyes met, he walked over.
あんた、トワだろ?
Who are you?
誰だ?
Right, who are you?
俺、ずっと前にあんたのことを見てから気になってたんだけどさ、まさかここにあんたが来るとは思ってなかったからびっくりしたよ。
Stalking me?
ここにいるってことは、つまり、そういうことだよな。
He smiled. It was clear what his intentions were. I mulled it over for a moment, then smiled faintly.
ああ、
ラッキー、聞いてみるもんだ。
こっち。
I jerked my chin in the direction of a narrow alley and started walking. As his footsteps followed after me, I came to a stop at the dead end on the other side of the alley and turned back to face him. With a lascivious grin, he wrapped both arms around me. Oh. Before he could latch on, I pushed him lightly back.
なあ、どうしたい？
I whispered as I gazed into his eyes.
だって。
俺にどうしてほしい？
そりゃ。
頼みがある。
なんだ？
ナイフ持ってるか？
は？ああ、小さいやつならあるけど。
He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a Swiss Army knife. He handed it to me. I took it and pulled out one of the blades.
切ってくれ。
No.
何？
これで俺を切ってほしい。ズタズタに引き裂いてくれ。
え
As he looked back at me in horror, I rolled up my sleeve and pressed the knife to my bare skin. Towa, you keep creating more work for me. Why? Why couldn't you like do it off screen?
おい、やめろよ。
簡単だろ。すぐに切れる。ほら、早く。
As the cut of my arm ached. Okay. Towa, you're scaring the man. Okay. It sliced through my shirt and skin, and the searing pain made me exhale. Even in the dark, I could tell my shirt was turning red. This poor guy. He's standing here watching this. My breathing grew uneven as my senses heightened. And then I pressed the blade against my shirt and dragged it in a different direction down my chest. Yeah? He looked at me in terror, took a few steps backwards, then bolted from the spot. As you should. Towa, no. No. Oh god. Oh no. I can't read this. Breathing heavily, I folded the blade close and dropped the knife into my coat pocket. The dark emotions pent up in my chest must have leaked out through the new holes in my skin. Enjoying the pleasant pain, I headed back down the alley. My mind felt feverish and I couldn't think straight. I stumbled along with no clue where I was going. Every now and then I'd pass someone who would look at me in alarm. In this town, I didn't have any caring friends. No one would reach out to help you, no matter how injured you were. Being nice to people would only get you manipulated. I bet it would. Besides, it wasn't all that uncommon to see a guy walking down the street, dripping blood. So, they all made sure to avoid eye contact as much as possible, so they wouldn't get dragged into any trouble. This was Shinko Umi culture in a nutshell. Suddenly, I found myself at the park. I don't know why I said suddenly like that. I was too tired to look up, so I walked along staring at the ground until I bumped into something. My lifeless legs gave out, and I hit the ground.
君は
Hey! The familiar, or should I say despicably unforgettable, voice drew my attention and I looked up. Oh! What happened to you? Of all the men I could have bumped into, it just had to be Fujieda. Behind his glasses, his eyes narrowed in disgust. Listen, I feel the same way about you. I'm kidding.
すごい格好だな
You're one to talk. Right. But Fujieda wasn't wearing his usual fancy getup. His hair was now messy, and his coat was dirty. Upon further inspection, his cheek was red and swollen. Silently, he offered me a hand. I ignored him and rose to my feet.
そっちこそ自分の格好を鏡で見てこいよ
He retracted his hand, shot me an icy sneer, and started walking.
待て
I called after him. He stopped short, let out a dramatic sigh, and slowly turned back to look at me.
なんだ
あんたが俺の周りを嗅ぎ回ってるのは知ってるそれを隠す気がないことも
I could barely get my tongue to cooperate. Swallowing my saliva, I struggled to string more words together.
知りたいのはユーフォリアのことか
He didn't answer, but I didn't care.
俺は昔のことをほとんど覚えてない母親の顔もろくに思い出せない
His eyebrows shifted suspiciously.
なのにどういう空前なんだか最近やたらと過去に関わる厄介事ばかり起きるでも過去を忘れてるんじゃ対処のしようがないだから俺は自分の過去を調べてる
You want to work together, man?
ユーフォリア店にいた人間のことも知ってる
I meant mother, of course. But Fujieda probably didn't know that she used to run the place. Fujieda lowered his head and fixed me with a piercing, probing stare.
提案だ俺が持ってる店の情報と引き換えにあんたが何を調べてるのか教えろ俺ならあんたが知りたがってる情報を高里組榊から引き出すことができるかもしれない
He stared at me in silence. Then, finally, he looked away.
君を信用していいのかわからない
That's fair.
だったら信用できるようにすればいいんだな
何をするつもりだ
Boy, don't tempt Towa.
証明してやるよ
Yeah? I smirked at him.
準備ができたらこっちから連絡するあんたの気が変わって連絡してくる分にはいつでも歓迎だ
What are you gonna do? With that, I started to walk off, but my legs buckled and I staggered. He reached out and grabbed me by the arm. The distance between us closed, and an unfamiliar smell wafted to my nose. His natural scent, perhaps. Whoa. Okay. I'm all for it. I got up on tiptoe and pressed my lips to his. He shoved me backwards and sent me reeling back to the ground. I could see him glaring at me, with a hand cupped over his mouth. This sight made me laugh.
お近づきの挨拶だ。
With a kiss? He glared at me venomously, then turned and walked off. Chuckling to myself, I sat there on the ground and watched them go. For the briefest moment, I got that perfect, steely composure to crack, and now I was tickled pink. But although I told him I'd convince him I was trustworthy, I didn't have any clue how to go about it. Now I'd have to actually come up with something. Oh. You never struck me as the kind of person to think, well, actually, never mind, I take that back. I didn't like him much, but there was only so much I could investigate on my own. If we were both investigating the same thing, then it would be far more efficient for us to team up. That much was fact. I exhaled, then slowly heaved myself onto my feet. Most of the cuts had stopped bleeding, except for the ones on my chest. Dragging my heavy body, I slowly headed for the clinic. When I got there, the lights were still on in the waiting room. According to Taku's message, the clinic was closed today, but apparently someone was here. I walked around to the side entrance, unlocked the door, and let myself in. Moments later, I heard someone walking down the hall, possibly to investigate the noise. It was Taku.
Towa, どうしたんだ? 喧嘩でもしたのか?
No. He frowned and strode over to me.
ずいぶんひどいな。
今日休みじゃなかったのか。
ん? ああ。
Hmm? He averted his eyes hesitantly.
もう終わったんだ。それより、怪我を見せてみろ。
ほっとけよ。
そうもいかんだろう。こっちへ来い。
As he spoke, he reached out, and I smacked his hand away.
Towa?
Did you forget? Did you really think I forgot that you tried to burn my mail? No.
触るな。
No, you don't forget that.
すぐ戻るから。少し待ってろ。
He held up both hands in a wait gesture, then hurried back down the hall. After a moment, he returned carrying something under his arm.
せめてこれ、持っていけ。
He offered me a first aid kit. As I stood there in silence, he forced it into my hands.
受け取らないなら、俺が部屋まで持ってくぞ。
I snatched the stupid first aid kit out of his hands. I did not want him following us. I'm sorry. I had to put a little hump and sass into it. Ideally, I didn't want him setting foot in my apartment at all. There was no telling whether he might try to steal my stuff. Come to think of it, had I received anything else since then? Or was that stack of papers the last delivery?
俺宛ての荷物、他には届いてないのか。
ないぞ。
You didn't burn it, did you?
お前が取ったんじゃないだろうな。
Right? Hmm?
もうそんなことはしない。
I mean, you can say that and do something different. He frowned back at me. I shot him one final look, then headed for the elevator. Listen, you can't blame him for being suspicious. 'Cause you can talk the talk, but if you don't walk the talk... I know what I said made no sense, but you get what I'm trying to say. When I reached the 3rd floor, I walked into my apartment. Then I tossed the first aid kit onto the sofa, ripped off my coat and shirt, and sat down. The cuts were still painful, but I didn't feel like treating them. Oh, come on, Towa. You don't want an infection, do you? Instead, I switched on the TV and grabbed a blister pack of sleeping pills off the coffee table. I popped one into my mouth, then grabbed the floor bottle and washed it down with booze. If I slept, I would probably have another nightmare. And when I woke up, I'd feel shitty and restless, and I'd have a migraine. Something told me my dreams might provide important clues. Since when did I start giving a shit about my past? But more importantly, what would happen once I remembered everything? Honey, I would not expect I would not expect a crash out. I would expect a crash out, there we go. Maybe nothing would change, or maybe everything would. I rested my head against the back of the sofa and closed my eye. Okay, there's people, and their eyes are watching you. The room was singed with scarlet light. I lay weakly on my side. All around me, I could hear murmuring. There were multiple people here. People breathing, people whispering, clothes rustling, ooh. And their eyes were all fixed on me. Eyes as curious as a child's. It was creepy. It was sickening. I wanted to puke. But at some point, I stopped feeling that way anymore. Maya, what in the world did you allow to happen to your kid? She's definitely not mom of the year. When I awoke, I felt like trash again. So I just lay there on the sofa and half listened to the drone of the TV. Once I started feeling a bit better, I sat up and grabbed my phone from the other side of the sofa. No word from Fujieda. I tossed the phone back where it was and looked at the TV. As I watched the images fly by in a kaleidoscopic blur, I thought to myself, how could I get Fujieda to trust me? He probably wouldn't be satisfied with my info if he felt he could have gotten it himself, which is very true. Sakaki seemed happy that I was remembering my mother. Maybe he would tell me more about her if I asked him nicely. Yes, I need to talk to Sakaki again. I rose from the sofa, got ready, and left the room without turning off the TV. Mom. Sakaki sat in his leather chair, with both hands on his desk, looking at me in amusement. I grimaced bitterly, stared down at the floor, and clenched my hands into fists. I mean, if you just look at a mirror, you got it right there. I mean, that's according to Tono and Taku. Yeah, that's according to them. I wanted to appeal to Sakaki's emotions to improve my chances of getting information. So I looked at him beseechingly. He looked at me in silence for a while. Then he opened a desk drawer and reached in. Maya? That's your mom. Yep, they were so right. It literally is looking at like a female version of Towa. Holy. Wait, who's that woman over there? Cause she must be important if she's not blurred out like the other two ladies. He set a photograph down on the desk. There I could see a group of well-dressed women. Then he pointed to one of them.
この人がお前の母親だ。
Slowly, I exhaled. So this was her. In the photo, the woman was smiling softly. Her expression was affectionate. You can do it, Towa. Just then, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and I braced myself against the desk. You can do it, just calm down, breath, maybe puke if you gotta, but you can do it.
おい、大丈夫か？
Sakaki rose from his chair.
そこのソファーに座れ。
As the edges of my vision turned black, I walked to the sofa and collapsed down onto it. I could hear that same voice again. Don't remember. Don't dig any deeper. Then Sakaki walked over and set the photo onto the coffee table in front of me.
これはお前にやろう。唯一、マヤが写っている写真だ。
The only one that exists? Really? As he spoke, he lowered his gaze to the photo with a melancholy expression on his face.
マヤはいい女だった。さすが組長が見初めた女だと思ったよ。おかしな意味じゃなく、純粋に尊敬してたんだ。
But who's this woman, though, next to Maya?
それに、マヤは愛情深くてな。お前をとても愛していたよ。お前ももちろん、マヤを愛していた。
Then why is he afraid of her?
そんな素晴らしい母親を亡くしたんだ。お前が記憶を失うほどのショックを受けたとしても仕方がない。
But for some reason, I found myself questioning this. Did I really love my mother? No. Well, I can't say memories don't lie, but feelings do not. You may forget people who, like, you may forget their name, maybe their face. You may forget some things about them, but you will always remember how they made you feel. Feel, that's the word I said. The instant the thought crossed my mind, an indescribable feeling welled up inside me. The longer I looked at the woman in the photograph, Maya, the more uneasy I felt.
マヤは階段から落ちて亡くなったんだ。
階段
Did Towa do it? Just then, a splitting headache erupted in my skull, making me grit my teeth. The voice in my head was getting louder and louder.
どうした？
Oh my god, did he do it?
なんでもない。それより階段から落ちたのか。
お前も巻き込まれて一緒にな。その時頭を打ったショックで記憶を失ったんだ。
Oh, okay. So maybe it was like this. So she was probably trying to like drag him somewhere, and he didn't want to go, obviously, because we all know what was going on, kind of. So he's like, no. So then she fell, and because she was holding on to him, he fell with her. She unfortunately passed, but he made it.
それは事故だったのか。
I mean, I'm just speculating. It could have been a third party.
そうだ。
I scrutinized Sakaki's smoke, but didn't notice any changes. Okay, but he might be retelling what people told him, you know? It could have actually been something different, you know? Like what you're thinking, Towa. Apparently he was telling the truth. I had thought maybe Ikuina, Asakura, and Kirihara were involved somehow, but Evidently not.
もっとマヤのことを思い出してやってくれ。そうすれば彼女も喜ぶだろう。
He spoke in a quiet voice full of emotion.
そうだな。
I answered curtly and rose from the sofa without looking at him. Then I grabbed the photo, stuffed it into my coat pocket, and staggered to the door.
少し休んでった方がいいんじゃねえか。
No.
いい。
いや、そんなんじゃ危ねえから人を連れてけ。おい、五十嵐。
He beat me to the door, opened it, and shouted out into the hall.
トワさん。
Oh, puppy boy. Higurashi walked into the study and looked at me in surprise.
体調が悪いらしい。送ってってやれ。
はい。
Higurashi put an arm around my shoulders for support, then escorted me out of the room.
トワさん、この間から本当大丈夫っすか？
Dramacal brr.
ああ。
I nodded and together we left the office. The dizziness had faded along with the voice in my head, but I still felt like utter shit. Back at my place, my condition showed no sign of improving. Lying on the sofa, I used my phone to take a digital photo of the paper photo and sent it to the email address listed on Fujieda's business card. Then I heaved myself up into a sitting position, rested my full weight against the back of the sofa, and had a smoke. That is, until I got a phone call from Fujieda himself.
見たか。
ああ。件名も本文もなかったが、誰の画像なんだ？
俺の母親。
He fell silent.
それはどういう意味だ？
ユーフォリア。店をやってたのは俺の母親だ。
なんだって？
He said, huh?
榊が写真を持ってた。証明としては十分だろ。目的が同じなら俺と組んだ方が効率がいい。
I agree.
もっと知りたければあんたが何を調べてるのかを話せ。
I tensed the muscles in my gut so he wouldn't hear how hard I was breathing.
確かに。この女性は君に似ているな。
母親だからな。
He's like, yeah.
過去については何か思い出したのか？
いや。
そうか。ならば、思い出した時にまた連絡してくれ。
And with that, he ended the call. I mean, hey, you have him interested. That's better than nothing. I pulled the phone away from my ear and let out a heavy sigh. I was still dizzy, but nevertheless I tried to call him back. I wanted him to tell me whether he agreed to my proposal. At this rate, our exchange was purely one-sided. And just then, his voice revived in my ears.
確かに。この女性は君に似ているな。
Instantly, I was struck with an indescribable impulse. I flung my phone down and ran into the bathroom. Then I looked in the mirror and squinted at my reflection. Did that woman and I really look alike? Not just slightly, but quite a bit? Well, of course we did. We were blood related after all. Oh! Okay. A feeling resembling anger welled up. Gritting my teeth, I punched the mirror. There came a deafening crash as my reflection shattered into fragments. But that wasn't enough. I slammed my forehead into the broken mirror. Towa! Oh my god. Over and over and over. Towa! The shards cut my skin, blood flicked onto the mirror. Oh my god. Warm droplets trickled down the center of my face. Breathing heavily, I picked up a shard of the mirror and peered into it. Okay. It showed the same reflection as all the rest, now with the blood streaming from my forehead. Well, that's but maybe I should just... No. My mother's face flashed in my mind. That kind, sweet, smiling woman. Her lips slowly moved, forming words, but I couldn't hear her voice. I focused all of my attention on her mouth in an attempt to read her lips. Out of nowhere, I felt a violently intense impact, like jumping awake from a dream. Slowly, I lowered the shard away and stared down into it. The sight of my own face covered in blood was too funny for words. What do you mean funny? It's not funny. Why was I losing my shit over a woman I could barely remember? Towa, no. Towa, do you hate me? And oddly enough, it was a comforting sight. He loves making my job harder. In the end, I dozed off on the sofa without treating my cuts. Or maybe I simply passed out.
Towa? 起きて。Towa? ねえ、起きてってば。
I could hear someone calling for me desperately.
Towa! 起きてよ Towa! ねえ。
もう起きてる。
I could tell from his voice that it was Ray. Gently, I grabbed his hand to stop him shaking me.
よかった。生きてた。Towa!
Sniffling, he donned a relieved smile.
様子を見に来たら血まみれでソファに倒れてるんだもの。死んだのかと思って本気でびっくりしたんだから。
At this, I sat up and looked down at myself. Even the bloodstains all over my hands and clothes, I could see how Ray would freak out.
何があったの？喧嘩？
Yeah, with himself. Wordlessly, I jerked my chin at the bathroom. He straightened up, walked over, and peeked in.
何あれ？どうしてあんなことしたの？
さあ。
さあじゃないでしょ。頭突きでもした？
Yeah. In response, I lifted my fingers to show him the cut on my forehead. The blood drained from his face.
額を切ったのね。その手も同じね。
As he spoke, he grabbed the first aid kit off the floor. It was the same one Taku had forced me to take.
タクは診察中だし、手当てくらいなら私でもできるから。
He bent over, parted my bangs, and began to treat my cut.
動かないでよ。
I watched him as he worked,
パーティー来なかったんだな。
え、あ、うん。
Hmm? He stopped and averted his gaze.
何かあったのか。お前が一番楽しみにしてたのに。
Right.
ちょっと具合が悪くなっちゃって。行けなくて本当に残念だったわ。
Why are you lying? He spoke quickly, and his smoke twitched restlessly. He was hiding something.
そういえば、藤枝さんがユーフォリアについて調べてるってやつ、何か分かったの？
母親の顔が分かった。
Right as he went back to treating my cut, he stopped again.
どういうこと？
榊から母親の写真をもらった。
そう。
He nodded pensively. His gaze shifted to the floor. Then he looked back at me intently.
ねえ、お母さんの写真見たい。
I had no reason to hide it from him, so I looked over at the sofa.
その辺にある。
その辺って大事なものなのに適当なんだから、もう。あった。
Mumbling to himself, he looked around the sofa until he spotted the photo.
確かに目鼻立ちが似てるような気がするわ。
He gazed at the photo for a while and looked back at me sadly.
もしかして鏡を割ったのってそのせい？
Yeah.
かもな。
お母さんのこと嫌いだ。
覚えてない。
じゃあどうして？
さあ。
I honestly didn't have an answer. I didn't know why I did it. Photo in hand, Ray hung his head, biting his lip.
もうやめた方がいいと思う。
He mumbled under his breath.
なんだか変な感じがする。あの藤枝って人の動きもおかしいし、うまく言えないけど、すごく嫌な感じがするの。とは、お母さんのことは覚えてないんでしょ？それってどうしても思い出したいの？どうしても過去のことが知りたい？
He looked at me imploringly.
ねえ、やめよう。これ以上、藤枝さんにも関わらない方がいいわ。過去なんて必要ない。今のままでもいいじゃない。とはだって、その方がいいでしょ。
I was fine just the way I was. Was I really, though? Admittedly, I didn't start feeling shitty until those mystery packages started arriving. Then I started having nightmares every night, and bad things happened to the people from my past, and FUJIEDA started getting nosy. Even the forgotten memories of my mother were starting to unravel. Frankly, I was tempted to throw in the towel. After all, it was what the voice in my head wanted. If I listened to it, then I would need to quit digging. But I had already come so far. If I could just remember my past, it would explain the nightmares and answer all of my questions. It's ultimately up to you, Towa. I'm just here for the ride. Silently, Ray set the photo on the coffee table and went back to giving me first aid. Likewise, I watched wordlessly as he bandaged my palm. After he was done, he fixed me with a pained look. Almost like the wounds were his, not mine.
傷、お大事にね。鏡も片付けなきゃね。
He packed everything back into the first aid kit, then left the room. But I continued to stare at my palm long after he was gone. When I awoke, I found myself sitting in an alley, propped up against the wall. What happened? Hello? I started to look around, but a dull ache in my skull made me grimace. What was I doing here? What happened yesterday? After Ray patched me up, I went out to a random bar and drank myself into a stupor by closing time. I couldn't remember what happened after I left the bar. Must have passed out in this alley. I fished around in my pocket and pulled out my cell phone. No messages from Fujieda. Exhaling, I pressed a hand to the grimy wall and slowly heaved myself up. Oh, exploration time. Not expect that, huh? Of course. Hello. Mm-hmm. Again? Mm-hmm.
Oh. Oh.
Oops. Oh well. Not like it's any new information.
Ah.
Fujieta's even asking Inada? It's crazy.
Oh.
Oh. Cute. Who's here? Oh, Arimura. What you doing here, bro?
どういうことですか?
Yeah.
Right, what are you doing here?
ええ。
Maybe.
ポジティブに。まあ。
いいですか?
I don't know about that one. I wouldn't say he's honest. He's half good.
そうなのか。
やめてください。
I mean, no shame in being in love with him. What?
そうか。
Right? Like, damn, sorry. Make one joke and suddenly bro's coming after your entire fucking ancestry.
Towa-san.
Oh, puppy boy. It sure is. It hurts to look at you. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. What's up?
ああ。
Uh-oh.
わからないっす。
Oh, Lord.
ポジティブに。それは。
Yeah. Because if you don't, he'll never come back. Mm-mm.
なるほど。
This blue is so
No.
pretty, man. It's so pretty. Of course.
じゃあな。
God, he's so adorable. Can I just like ruffle his hair or something? Like, good boy, good boy. Thank
どう
you.
も。
申し訳ありません。
Is she important?
ああ。
Because she's got a face and everything.
あら、
Oh, Nami! Because I was about to say, is she important?
まあ。
A little bro. True.
ちょっと。
Let's see. Responds vaguely.
ネガティブに。
I fell. Yeah?
実はね。
そうか。
It's a little bit deep. You're afraid 2.0, no.
何よそれ。
One is already enough.
はあ、
そうか。
Hi, Honami. Oh. Mm-mm. I'm not going inside. I don't want to be around Taku. That's fair, honey. That's fair. Alright. I think we've been everywhere. I had no intention of going back to the clinic. Instead, I walked into a random building and checked my phone. I had some notices from Taku and Ray, but none from Fujieda. My only option was to keep waiting. Yeah, pretty much. Three days later. To avoid having to see Taku, I spent as little time at the clinic as humanly possible. I wouldn't come home until after Taku had left for the day. The rest of the time, I was either getting drunk at a random bar or sleeping on the streets, sometimes in the park. Damn, homeless. This was what my life was like before I moved in at the clinic, so it didn't really bother me. More importantly, I was waiting for Fujieda to get back to me, but I still hadn't gotten any notice from him. I sat nestled in the concrete tunnel from last time, drinking a little bottle of booze. I'm sorry, I'm just like imagining him all hunched up in the tunnel and drinking from like one of those little bottles. Oh man. It's a funny sight. Evidently, my negotiations with Fujieda hadn't worked out. But to be fair, I was totally talking out of my ass at the time, and he was by no means obligated to respond to my one-sided offer. Still, I couldn't help but feel like I screwed up. What did I hope to get out of an information exchange with Fujieda? I leaned my head back against the curved concrete and closed my eye. Booze had gone to my head, and a hint of drowsiness settled on my eyelid. Slowly, my consciousness sank into the darkness. When I next opened my eye, I sensed a presence next to me. Someone was peeking into the tunnel. Fujieda. Startled, I sat upright. In an instant, I was wide awake.
酔っているのか
He furrowed his brow quizzically.
それにその顔喧嘩でもしてきたのか
As he spoke, he reached out to me. Was he trying to help me up? Reflexively, I smacked his hand away. He let out an exasperated sigh.
ずっとここにいるつもりかそれなら私も事務所へ戻るが
He and I had met here once before. I thought back to that night as I looked at him. Why would he stop to help me? Was he more of a meddler than he looked at first glance? Or did he need something from me? There had to be some reason he didn't simply turn a blind eye and keep on walking. Either way, I was hoping to talk to him, so this suited me just fine. I crawled out of the tunnel and turned to face him.
歩けるかまあいい行くぞ
With no explanation whatsoever, he turned on his heel and started walking. Where was he taking me? His unmoving smoke was completely unreadable. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Glaring after him, I reluctantly followed after him. As it turned out, Fujieda brought me to the clinic. Careful to ensure we wouldn't be seen, I brought him in through the side entrance, then took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Inside my apartment, I pulled off my coat. Just then, Fujieda thrust his hand out at me. Resting on his palm was a pocket watch.
これを返そうと思って村瀬クリニックへ向かっているところだったんだ
Wordlessly, I took the watch.
先日の君の母親の写真についてだが
He started talking without waiting for me to react.
写真に写っていた店の特徴を調べてみた。あの写真はユーフォリアで撮られた可能性が高い。さらに君の母親のことも分かった。源氏名はマヤ、本名は桜木ユマ。
As he spoke, he observed my reaction. Sakuragi Yuma. Hearing that name added a small weight to my chest, but nothing more.
マヤはかなりの美人と評判で、組長の愛人だったそうだ。組長も入れ込んでいたようだな。
And if she asked for anything, he'd give it to her. Yeah.
性格はおとなしく、誰ともつるまない一匹狼だったらしい。ついでと言ってはなんだが、君のことも調べさせてもらった。
Okay.
君は戸籍の登録がない。これは相続手続きの処理をしている時に分かったことだ。まあ、新興味出身の人間にはよくあることだが、そのトワという名前は本名じゃないんだろう。戸籍がないなら本名もない。
Maybe he had none to begin with, kind of like Otaro.
君の本名に当たる名前は何だ？昔は何と呼ばれていたんだ？
That's the thing, he can't remember.
覚えてない。
覚えてない？本当に？
ああ。
さすがにそれはないだろう。
What do you mean?
嘘じゃない。
More accurately, the memory kept erasing itself. It was buried in there somewhere, but every time I actively tried to remember, I would forget again. Even if someone else literally told me what it was, I would forget. How does that happen? Maybe because he doesn't want to be? You know, maybe it's his brain's way of saying, no, no, no. Because once you remember it, you're gonna remember everything else, and yeah, maybe. Okay, that too. Proof of how much I subconsciously hated my name, I guess. Fujieda fixed me with a probing look, then continued.
戸籍がないなら住所もない。君は先代組長の息子だそうだが、組長の身辺を調べているときに君の情報は一切出てこなかった。
Damn, I'm not even his kid? It's crazy.
マヤは息子と共に事故に遭い、新興味総合病院に入院。その後死亡。息子は退院したと。ここまではいい。問題は妹に関する情報がどこにもないということだ。
So he never had a sister? He narrowed his eyes sharply.
君には妹がいた。それは間違いないんだな。
ああ。
君が先代組長の息子だという話は高里組の複数の関係者から出てきた。公的な記録がなくとも証言されたと言っていいだろう。だが君の妹の話は全く出なかった。つまり
Maybe he considered the other person who was suffering with him a sister?
妹という存在を認識しているのは君だけということだ。
Or it could be that they covered it up.
何が言いたい？
それはこちらが聞きたい。君の妹は本当に存在しているのか？
Honestly, I'm confused now. Did she actually exist? Because, I mean, Towa would have no reason to lie. Right? Because like I said, maybe it got covered up about him having a sister. I could only vaguely remember my sister. But she definitely existed. She couldn't possibly be a mere figment of my imagination. Hmm.
妹がいたことを証明できるものは何かあるのか？
But the rabbit, no.
箱にぬいぐるみが入ってただろ。
Fujieda frowned.
知人の妹のものだ。
I looked back at him darkly.
持って行ったのはお前か。
あれは君のものじゃない。名前が書いてあっただろ
名前
I gave him a funny look. I examined that bunny several times and never saw any name on it.
名前なんて書いてなかった。
いや、あった。
Was this man delusional? Or just stubbornly mistaken? We stared each other down. Eventually, Fujieda conceded.
うすうす感じているとは思うが、これから調査が進むにつれて、君も知らないような様々な真実が明るみに出ることになるだろう。
Oh, so you are gonna work together with him.
これまでの認識が崩れるような辛い現実を突きつけられるかもしれない。それは分かっているな。
Like he never had a sister. His mom wasn't as sweet as people thought she was. The Takasato leader's not actually even his real dad.
そっちこそ。
If anyone was about to have a rude awakening, it was this guy, not me. Who about that for Towa? Besides, it was too late for me to back down. No matter what. He nodded slightly.
君の妹に関しては、村瀬先生にも電話で聞いたんだが、
お
はぐらかされたんだ。そこで、攻め方を変えることにした。マヤと同時期に、ユーフォリアで働いていた女性スタッフの一人の足取りをつかんだ。勤め先がここから近い。
Was it that woman?
君と関わりのある店。柳川コーヒー店だ。あまりにも近くて驚いただろう。今から話を聞きに行くんだが、君も来るか？
You better say yes.
ああ。連絡もよこさずに何をしてるのかと思ったら、しっかり働いてたってことか。
情報には情報で返す。これで貸し借りはなしだ。
Apparently, he had no intention of telling me his true objective. I shrugged and rolled my eye.
弁護士先生らしいな。
Right.
その権限を振りかざして調べたのか。
方法などどうでもいいだろう。
Just then, his phone began to ring.
はい。
He pulled it out and raised it to his ear. But he didn't say another word after that. He merely listened. Then, after a moment, the call ended.
無言電話だ。おそらく高里組だろう。
高里組。あんた、高里組の弁護士なんだろ。
He smirked faintly.
解雇された。今は嫌がらせを受けて監視される身だ。
Wait, when did they fire you? At this, I straightened up. I remembered a time his hair and clothes were all messy. Maybe he had just finished having it out with someone in the Takasatogumi.
そりゃ余計なことしたな。
余計なこと？
I might have daddled.
俺のせいだろ。
I shouldn't have said anything to Sakaki.
気にする必要はない。遅かれ早かれ、こうなっていた。
He spoke in an emotionless voice, and then looked at me.
正直、私はまだ君を完全には信用していない。だが、君が持ちかけてきた情報の共有に関しては、
Especially now that he doesn't work with them anymore. So he can't go snooping around like he used to.
君が忘れている記憶を思い出してもらった方が近道になるのは確かだ。だから、それまでは協力するということでいいな。
ああ。
In the end, I had gotten my wish. I exhaled.
俺の連絡先は言っとくけど、クリニックに電話しても無駄だから。
無駄？
うちの先生がいろいろと警戒してるんだよ。
Fujieda nodded in understanding.
そうか。 君の電話番号は秘書から聞いているし、メールアドレスも写真を送ってきた時に把握している。が、一応交換をしておこ
う。He pulled his phone back out. Likewise, I grabbed my phone and we traded info, including our messenger IDs.
それでは出かける準備をしてくれ。私は外で待っている。
With that declaration, he left the room. As new questions swirled in my head, I rose from the sofa. Then I put on a face mask and pulled my hood low over my eyes. Someone who used to know Maya might recognize me on sight, so I wanted to conceal my face. Once I was ready, I left the apartment. Which is true, especially since you look like her so much. I'll be like looking at a male version of her. Together, Fujieda and I headed to Yanagawa Cafe. When we walked in, a waitress approached.
いらっしゃいませ。何名様ですか？
すみません。こちらに長谷川妙子さんがいらっしゃると伺ったのですが。
長谷川さんですか？少々お待ちください。
Confused, the waitress walked off into the kitchen. After a moment, a different waitress came walking over. So it is her!
私が長谷川ですが。
I was like, she's way too detailed to just be, what is that? Side character. Like the, you know what I mean? She tilted her head anxiously. The woman looked to be in her mid-30s, with large round eyes like Adele. I recognized her as a waitress who had served me a handful of times. Fujieda withdrew his business card case and offered her one from inside.
はじめまして。弁護士の藤枝と申します。
My name is Fujieda. Holding the business card, Hasegawa looked back in surprise.
弁護士さん？
お仕事中にすみません。少々お聞きしたいことがありまして。マヤさんについてお話をお伺いできればと。
She bought a bolt. Instantly, her expression shifted. Her eyes widened, and the blood drained from her face as she shook her head.
それは。
もちろん、報酬はお支払いします。
I don't think it's money she's worried about. She pursed her lips tightly, holding something back. Was she desperate for money?
お店の裏口へ回ってもらえますか？すぐに行けますから。
Nah, she's gonna make a break for it. I know she is. She spoke under her breath, then tucked the business card into the pocket of her apron and hurried off into the back. Fujieda looked back at me and glanced pointedly at the door. I turned on my heel and led him out of the cafe. We walked around to the back alley. Fujieda stood at the door, and I sat against the wall, a short distance away. He said we'd overwhelm her if we both talked to her at once, so I agreed to step back and listen. A strong wet smell filled the narrow alley. I looked up and spotted thick clouds overhead, threatening to rain on us. After a while, Hasegawa came out through the back door. Yes. I had a little bit of work still.
待たせしました。
Oh, she didn't run. Okay. I honestly thought she would. She hung her head like a child preparing for a lecture.
それで何を聞きたいんですか？
先ほど言った通り、マヤさんについてです。あなたが昔、マヤさんと同じ店で働いていたと伺ったので。
本当にただそれだけです。私は何も知りません。
マヤさんはシエロを辞めた後、新たに店を始められたそうですね。ユーフォリア。
本当に何も知らないんです。話すことなんてありません。
That's making you more suspicious, honey. Out of nowhere, Hasegawa started shouting. She was afraid of something. Fujieda regarded her calmly.
10年以上前の話ですか。知人の妹が失踪しました。私はその件にユーフォリアが絡んでいるのではないかと考えています。だから何でもいい。何か知っていたら教えてもらえませんか。
His friend's sister went missing? This was news to me. Was that his true objective? Hasegawa bit her lips so hard she nearly drew blood. Her hands clutched at her apron.
本当に知りません。無理です。帰ってください。
Staring at the ground, she choked the words out in a shaky voice. Fujieda started to say something, paused, then changed tack.
長谷川さん、私は弁護士です。もしかしたらあなたの力になれるかもしれません。何か思い出した時には名刺の連絡先へご連絡を。
He must have decided to call it quits because he shot me a look. I rose to my feet, and when he started walking, I followed after him. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw Hasegawa still standing there, hanging her head. She was so rigid, I half expected her to pass out. After that, the sky got darker, and the rain came.
降ってきたな。
Ooh, new aerial shot. No, wait, not aerial. The other one. Ground shot. Fujieda started walking faster, so I matched my pace to his. As we walked, he looked at me in silence. One look at his tense expression, and I knew what he was thinking. It was the same thing I had sensed myself.
つけられている。
Beneath the drone of the rain, I could faintly hear footsteps somewhere behind us. Then Fujieda started walking in the opposite direction of the clinic, possibly in an attempt to shake our pursuer. We turned a corner, walked straight, then entered a side street. Meanwhile, the icy rain soaked our hair and clothes. Once the passerby thinned on the streets, the rhythmic footsteps suddenly exploded.
走れ。
Let the guns! As Fujieda shouted, a gunshot rang out. Flexibly, I ducked and ran down the street toward the downtown area. Together, we threw ourselves into the hectic crowd. Breathing heavily, I camouflaged myself among the bobbing umbrellas.
さすがに無関係の
I think they will.
巻き込むことはしないだろう。
Fujieda muttered under his breath without turning to look at me.
高里組か。
He ran a hand through his wet hair, still licking his bangs back.
ここから私のマンションが近い。場所を教えるから先に行け。クリニックには戻るな。ディトックへ。
Gotcha. With that, he moved away from me. Moments later, he had disappeared into the crowd. Then I felt my phone buzz in my coat pocket. Oh, sorry. I was about to skip without reading. It was a message from Fujieda containing the GPS location of his condo. So I headed there as per his instructions. I was dead as about to skip it. Secret condo. The rain rapidly grew heavier, and by the time I arrived, I was soaked from head to toe. Amid all the skyscrapers stuffed to the gills with low-income residents, Fujieda's condo was located in a small 2-story building. Buildings of this size were reserved for the rich. I stopped just outside the front entrance, beneath the awning. Apparently, Fujieda wasn't here yet. I somehow doubted that he'd gotten himself caught, but then again, our pursuer had a gun. There was a chance he'd gotten shot. I stood there, fidgeting restlessly. Before long, a series of rhythmic splashing sounds cut through the rainy gray haze. It was Fujieda. He ran right up to me, gasping for breath. Little strands of hair were messily stuck to his forehead, and his designer coat was darkly soaked. No.
そっちこそ遅かったな。
巻くのに少し手間取った。
He didn't appear to be injured. Together, we passed through the automatic sliding doors and into the foyer. Dripping water onto the polished floor, Fujieda unlocked the door to the elevator lobby. Leave it to rich people to install an elevator in a 2-story building. True. We took the elevator to the 2nd floor, walked to the door at the far end of the hall, and stopped. There was no keyhole. Fujieda pulled the key card from his inner pocket and held it up to the panel beside the door. I heard a beep, then an electric whirring sound. It'd be impossible to pick these state-of-the-art keyless locks. Wow, it's as dark as my soul. I followed him inside, took my shoes off at the door, and walked out the hall. In a blink, my cold body was enveloped by the warmth of the heater. Fujieda paused midway at a door, but gestured for me to continue straight ahead. As instructed, I headed to the door at the end of the hall and walked in. Damn. There I found a spacious living room. The gray and white interior furnishings afforded the place a pristine vibe, with everything precisely in its proper place. Almost like it was a staged showroom. It was exactly the sort of home I'd expect Fujieda to live in, but at the same time it felt a little too perfect. Almost like he was intentionally leaning into the stereotype. As I stood blankly in the living room, he returned carrying a folded bath towel. His hair was no longer slicked back, which changed his aesthetic quite a bit. I had thought he was older than me, but now I wasn't so sure. He saw me standing there and offered me the towel. I took it and draped it over my head, then started stripping on the spot because yes, that's what you do. My clothes were so waterlogged I could see a puddle forming at my feet. After I pulled off my coat and shirt, and let my pants fall to my ankles, I sensed the gaze and looked up. Fujieda was staring at me with a hard look on his face. But when our eyes met, he quickly turned away. I figured he was scandalized by my scars. Most people have the same reaction when they laid eyes on my bare body for the first time. As I stood there in my underwear and toweled myself off, he started to leave the room. Listen, we all have the same equipment. I teased him with a smirk. Mostly I just wanted to get a reaction out of him. Someone like me would ordinarily never be on speaking terms with a guy like him. But since I had the opportunity, I wanted to get a look at this tightwad. Not what I expected to read today, but I'm enjoying it. He probably had skin as perfectly pristine as this condo. He glared at me silently.
別にバスルームへ行きたいならご自由に。
I snickered. Then, with his eyes narrowed, he whipped off his coat. Oh! Next came the suit jacket. Then he started unbuttoning his starched white shirt. He had taken the bait. I thought he was too logical for this, but apparently he was a bit of a hothead. Amused, I watched this angry striptease and delighted in the slow reveal of his secrets. But once his skin was bare. Ooh! My eye widened. The skin I expected to be flawless was in fact riddled with scars. Nearly as many as me, in fact, though they looked different. While mine were inflicted through cuts, the majority of his looked like burn marks. I thought back to the way he looked at me earlier. I thought he reviled me, but maybe he realized we weren't so different. After all, it was the same realization I was now having. At the same time, I could feel my heart race. I could have imagined that someone so far removed from poverty would have a body that looked like mine. In terms of status, he was supposed to be part of the ruling class. But instead, he was quite possibly even weirder than I was. How did he get these scars? What sort of life must he have lived? Suddenly, I was really curious about him. He was my polar opposite, and yet our bodies were a perfect match. Who wouldn't be a little curious? Spurred on by the thrill of it, I felt my lips curl into a smile.
なんだ、弁護士なんて大層な仕事してるくせに、俺にそっくりだな。
Oh, that really looks like it hurts. Oh.
あんたも傷が好きなのか、俺みたいに。
He didn't respond, just stared at me from under his sopping bangs, his eyes glinting fiercely. But his silence only intrigued me all the more. If I had to guess, whatever caused his scars was now a fundamental part of who he was as a person. In which case, I really wanted to know. I wanted to paint it. But of course, with a guy like him, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. No way I could break through his impenetrable armor. A small sigh, I sat down on the luxurious sofa in nothing but my skivvies. Then I grabbed the remote off the coffee table and switched the TV on. I heard the door open, so I looked over my shoulder and realized Fujieda had disappeared along with my wet clothes. A few minutes later, he reappeared and set something down beside me on the sofa. It was the stuff from my pockets, my phone, cigarettes, and lighter. He stood next to the sofa and stared intently at the TV screen, though I knew he wasn't really watching. Likewise, I shifted my gaze to the screen and zoned out. Background noise filled the empty space between us. The screen was showing what looked like an old suspense film. The protagonist walked up to a decrepit mansion and stepped inside. There was some kind of visual effect. The inside of the mansion was tinged with a seductive scarlet. This connected with something else in my mind. A room in a mansion somewhere. I always viewed the room from the same position. The silhouette of a woman, there I guess. The vaguest shadow of a little girl. My sister. That's right, It's...
夢。
I was snapped back to reality by the sound of my own voice.
夢
Holy... Bro, look really different. Whoa! It's amazing what a hairstyle can do for a person. Holy... People were not kidding. I looked over and found Fujieda staring dubiously back at me. This was my first real look at his face, and frankly, I almost didn't recognize him. That's what I was saying! With his glasses off and his hair down, he looked nothing like the businessman I originally met. Now I was starting to think we were around the same age after all. I looked at him for a while. He frowned at me. Then I remembered that he had heard me mutter to myself. I tried to think of some way to play it off, but changed my mind. Maybe I could tell him about the nightmares I'd been having. They were tied to my past, so if I shared them with him, maybe it could lead to something.
最近毎晩のように悪夢を見る。おそらく俺が覚えていない過去の夢だ。
He looks so different. The fuck?
夢には母親が出てくる。顔はよく見えないけど、多分そうだ。それから妹も。それがいつでどこにいるのかまではわからない。思い出せない。ただ夢の中の俺は子供で恐怖心を抱いてる。何かに怯えてる。目が覚めるとひどく気分が悪くて、じわじわとまるで遅効性の毒に蝕まれてるみたいだ。最近は夢を頻繁に見る。ずっと薬でごまかしてきた。けど、いい加減ノイローゼになりそうだ。
When I said it all out loud, I realized that these dreams were affecting me a lot more than I thought. I scoffed at myself for whining, then looked back at Fujieda for his reaction. His expression was still hard, but he didn't avert his gaze.
必ず真実を暴く。その時に君が知りたがっていることも全てわかるだろう。それまでの辛抱だ。
I'm sorry. It's just every time I see him like this, I'm like, it really is amazing how a different hairstyle and, unfortunately, taking off your glasses can make you look like a different person. Like, this whole time, I've just sit there and be like, why do people always say that people who take off their glasses look different? Now I see why. I see why now. With that, he left the room. On screen, the male protagonist was fighting off the female villain in a climactic final battle. An anguished scream cut through the dramatic music.
真実を暴く。ね。
I snorted. Then I reached out to grab a cigarette, but they were still sopping wet, so I decided against it. As I absently watched the protagonist defeat the villain with a dagger, Fujieda walked back into the room. His unkempt hair and lack of glasses hadn't changed, but now he was wearing different clothes. Once again, he set something down next to me. This time, it was a clean white shirt and jeans, all folded up.
君の服は今洗濯している。今日はこれを着てくれ。
どうも。
I didn't actually feel grateful, but I rose from the sofa and got dressed. Clothes were a little big on me, but not noticeably so. I could smell the soft scent of a detergent I didn't recognize. It made me strangely uneasy.
まだ雨は止まないようだな。
Fujieda peeked out through a small gap in the curtains as he spoke. I sat back down on the sofa and watched TV as the credits rolled. Beneath the quiet ending song, I could hear the faint patter of the raindrops. I could picture the rain pouring down in endless sheets outside, and those straight lines shifted into the scars on Fujieda's body. Now I was craving nicotine. how it just goes from one thing to another. Crazy. Once the rainstorm finally passed and my clothes had a quick spin in the dryer, I decided to head back to the clinic. Today marked the start of the winter holidays, but I had a feeling Taku would be there regardless. Fujieda was going to call the clinic's number to ask to speak to him, but I stopped him. Taku didn't think highly of Fujieda, so there was a chance he'd outright decline. Besides, I still wasn't ready to talk to him yet. But Fujieda insisted on talking along to the clinic, so I reluctantly agreed. On our way out, he handed me a paper bag containing my old clothes. I told him I didn't need a bag, but unfortunately for me, he was insistent about that part too. When we arrived outside the clinic, the lights were on in the waiting room. We walked to the side entrance, and I unlocked the door. From there, we walked down the hall to the exam room. The door was ajar, and light was streaming out from inside. When I opened the door, I found Taku in the middle of giving first aid to Ray. They both looked up in surprise.
Towa?
Hi. Then they looked at Fujieda. His current appearance was nothing like the bespectacled businessman they met previously, so they probably struggled to recognize him.
怪我したのか？
ええ、そうよ。
As the two of them narrowed their eyes in suspicion, Fujieda bowed his head.
突然すみません。
Oh, damn.
トワさんと外で偶然お会いしたんですが、急に雨が降ってきたので、私の部屋で雨宿りをしまして。もともと村瀬先生にお話があったので、失礼かとは思ったのですが、直接伺わせていただきました。トワさんが電話はしない方がいいだろうと。
I'm sorry. I'm just trying my best not to comment on his appearance anymore. Taku and Ray stared back skeptically.
それでお話とは？
Taku asked tersely.
マヤさんについて知っていることを聞かせていただけないかと。
Taku's expression twisted bitterly.
お話しできることは何もありません。
Liar.
でしたら、これから話すことを聞いていてください。
Fujieda withdrew a weathered memo pad from his jacket pocket and flipped it open.
トワさんのお母様の名前。源氏名はマヤ。本名、桜木由馬。由馬さんは息子さん、トワさんと共に何らかの事故に遭い、入院されていますね。
階段から落ちた。俺はその時に記憶を一部失った。
Taku fixed me with a pained look, then lowered his gaze to the floor.
そして、マヤさんはそのまま亡くなられた。こちらで調べて分かったのは、これだけです。村瀬先生はマヤさんの死後、トワさんの診察をされていたんですよね。知っていることをお話しいただけませんか？
Taku's brow furrowed deeply. But after a long silence, he finally spoke.
トワの父親が誰なのかはご存知かと思いますが、事情が事情ですから、退院後はこちらで引き取って経過を見ていました。
Is he actually my daddy, though?
俺が知っているのはそれだけです。詳しいことまではわかりません。
一つお伺いしたいのですが。
Fujieda shot me a sidelong glance, then turned back to Taku.
トワさんは無戸籍だ。だから本名が存在しない。代わりに何と呼ばれていたのか教えていただけませんか？
それは
できない。
Why not? Taku answered firmly.
むしろなぜ彼をトワと違う名前で呼ぶのですか？
Yeah.
その理由は？
Fujieda pressed calmly.
それは本人がそれでいいと言ってるからだ。トワさん、君はなぜ周りに自分をトワと呼ばせているんですか？
別に楽だから。
それなら昔の名前で呼ばれても問題はない。そうですね。
Just then, a strangely restless impulse shot up my spine, making my whole body go numb. No. I could hear a voice in my head. I didn't want anything to do with my real name. As the restlessness swelled, the voice in my head started to scream. My heart pounded faster and faster as my palms began to sweat.
今一度本名を認識することで過去に関する何かを思い出すかもしれない。
Yeah, might.
それが重要な手がかりへつながる可能性もある。トワさん、いいですね。
He framed it like a question, but the look in his eyes made it clear I didn't have a choice. I started to protest, but the nausea forced me to keep my mouth shut. As I started to feel worse and worse, I closed my eye and breathed heavily. My heart was threatening to explode. My heart... Nope. Start over. I'm sorry. My heart was threatening to explode. My head ached, my chest tight. I felt dizzy.
村瀬先生、
Fujieda turned his intense gaze on Taku.
ねえ、トワが苦しそう。もうやめて。
Ray spoke up hastily.
藤枝さん、あなたは一体何を調べてるんだ？
As Taku glared back, Fujieda spoke quietly.
ある真実を明らかにするために動いています。あなたがいろいろと暴き立てることで誰かが傷つくかもしれない。それでも構わないと。ええ、この件は思った以上に深い闇の中にある。暴こうとすれば必ずどこかに影響が出るでしょう。だったらなおさら話すことはできない。本当にそれでいいとお思いですか？
Fujieda stared Taku down. His eyes glinted coldly.
ずっと黙っていることが本当にトワさんのためになると。トワさんは日々悪夢にうなされている。薬を飲んで抑えようとしているようですね。それほどまでの悪夢を見ること自体異常な状況だとは思わないんですか？
Taku growled and averted his eyes.
だからこそだ。そんな悪夢、過去なんて思い出さない方がいいはずだ。トワさんは過去を知りたいと言っている。自ら望んでるんです。それでも。
Oh, so you don't care what Towa has to say. You don't care about his opinion. I see how it is, Taku. Taku stared at the floor, his hands balled into fists.
先ほど言った通り、過去を思い出すことで周りにも影響が出るかもしれません。ですが、それはトワさんも覚悟の上でしょう。そして。
Oh, I'm sorry. Taku looked at me bitterly, as if to confirm whether Fujieda had the right of it. Ray was looking at me too, his anxiety palpable. I stood there in silence, enduring the headache and vertigo.
もう一度お聞きします。あなたがやっていることは本当にトワさんのためになるのですか？せめて名前くらいはあなたの口から真実を伝えてもいいのでは？
Taku shot me an uncertain look. I didn't want to hear my name. But on the other hand, I didn't understand why I felt so strongly about it. What was the harm? Would it change anything? Swallowing dryly, I looked back at Taku.
言ってくれ。
He grimaced back at me, but reluctantly gave in and looked away.
ハルト。桜木。ハルトだ。
Sakuragi Haruto. Haruto. Everything in my field of vision warped like the contents of a paint bucket.
Towa!
Towa!
The voices around me all sounded muffled. Like a twisting kaleidoscope, bright colors filled my vision, all while something replayed in my mind. A twisted sneer, stares, flying, falling, falling, falling.
おい、どうした？
Towa!
The vision went black, and the next thing I knew, I was on the floor.
部屋へ連れて行こう。
わかったわ。
Taku and Ray positioned themselves on my left and right, then hauled me up. I still couldn't process what was happening. All I could see was colors. My heart thumped hard against my ribcage, intensifying the headache and nausea. But eventually my consciousness grew too heavy to carry, and I let go. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Well, now that he knows, he's probably going to do some digging. I wonder what he'll find. FUJIEDA, I mean. When I opened my eye, I saw a familiar ceiling. Slowly, I looked around. I was in my apartment, lying on the bed. There was something cold on my forehead. I reached up to touch it and found a wet washcloth.
Towa, 具合はどう?
A worried voice rang out as say Towa, as Ray came into view. Next to him stood Taku and FUJIEDA. Then I remembered that I passed out. 1 minute we were talking, and then all of a sudden I started hallucinating. It was because I heard my old name. Sakuragi Haruto. The memory was enough to make me sick.
Towa, 倒れてから1時間くらい眠ってたのよ。
嫌な思いをさせちまったな。
Taku looked utterly miserable.
何か思い出したことはないか？
Yeah, that makes me sick. Fujieda's less than considerate question earned him a scathing look from Taku.
これがトアの幸せにつながってるとは思えない。悪いことをしたとは思っています。が、やってみなければわからなかったことでもあります。こればかりは仕方がないでしょう。
True.
あんたは。
But right as Taku snapped, a buzzing sound filled the air.
失礼。
Fujieda pulled his cell phone from his jacket pocket and raised it to his ear.
はい。あ、どうしました？ええ、大丈夫です。それでは、待ち合わせ場所の情報を今から送ります。はい。よろしくお願いします。
He ended the call and looked at me.
先ほどの女性からだ。マヤさんについて話したいことがあるらしい。会う場所はこちらで用意する。君も来てくれ。
And you know what's crazy? We're probably gonna go meet her, and she's no longer with us.
わかった。
誰からだ？
None of your business. Sorry. Taku and Ray looked at the two of us suspiciously.
マヤさんの情報を提供してくれる女性です。今日、話を聞きに伺ったんですが、断られました。
大丈夫なのか、それは。
どういう意味ですか？
高里組はマヤさんのことを隠したがってる。あんたの動き次第で、その女性にも危険が及ぶかもしれない。
She's already in danger. She's been in danger since, she ran into Maya.
その可能性は高い。というより、高里組には把握されているかと。
何？
ここに来る前に銃撃を受けました。
銃撃？
怪我？
Do I look hurt?
ありません。村瀬先生。
Fujieda turned his sharp gaze on Taku.
大変申し訳ないのですが、私はあなたのことを完全には信用していません。あなたは高里組とつながっている。
確かに高里組の人とは知り合いだし、患者さんとしてもうちに来
Oh
るけど。
no, no. You must understand. He works for them. Ray seemed to sense that something was wrong because he frowned and looked at Taku. Likewise, I shot a questioning look at Fujieda. Where did that come from? He took one look at our confused reactions and sighed in mild annoyance.
どうやらそこのお二人は知らないようですね。村瀬先生、秘密はあまり多く抱えない方がいい。身を滅ぼしますよ。ただ、私はあなたと高里組の関係には興味がない。あなたが私の邪魔さえしなければ、口を挟むつもりはありません。
No,
話を戻しますが、いいですか？
of course. I mean, you're already taking charge of the conversation, might as well. He looked around the tensely silent room.
話を聞きに行ったとき、彼女はひどく怯えていました。何かひどいトラウマがあるのか、それとも誰かに脅されて口止めでもされているのか。
Both is an option too.
どちらにしろ、本来であればこちらと関わらず、知らぬ存ぜぬで通した方が彼女にとっては安全です。なのに、すぐに連絡してきたということは、状況が変わったか、何か相談したいということでしょう。とにかく、向こうから連絡があった以上、会わないわけにはいきません。こちらとしても、手がかりを得る機会を逃したくはありませんから。
As Taku grimaced silently, Fujieda turned his attention to me.
先ほどの話の続きだ。昔の名前を聞いて、何か思い出したか？
いや、
I muttered and closed my eye. There was something mixed in with the kaleidoscope hallucination, but I couldn't remember what. What was that? When I opened my eye, Fujieda nodded slightly.
すぐに思い出さなくてもいい。思い出すきっかけになっていることを願う。それでは、私はそろそろこれで。
I thought he was going with you. He walked through the door, opened it, and left.
危険だな。
そうね。
お前はいいのか？これで。
For Taku's question, I looked up at the ceiling.
はあ、
It was too late to turn back now. Not after I had come so far.
そうか。だが、俺は。
He faltered and looked away.
ねえ、タク。さっきの話なんだけど。
Ray paused, summoned his resolve, then continued.
藤枝さんが言ってた高里組とつながりがあるって。
Taku let out a heavy sigh and pursed his lips. Then he looked up with a pained expression on his face.
あんな風に意味深に言われちまったら話さないわけにはいかないな。借金があるんだ、高里組に。
開業するときにお金を借りたとか。
それも含めて他にもある。だから俺は負債者なんだ。新興味から出ることができない。
そうだったのね。
Ray frowned sadly. Yeah. We know all about it.
まあ、なんだ。高里組に借金があるなんて、できれば知られたくはないからな。とはいえ、黙っていてすまなかった。
He averted his eyes guiltily.
うん、いいの。私の方こそごめんなさい。話してくれてありがとう。
Y'all, that's only half of it. He ain't telling you about the stuff he's doing for Dono. Silently, I looked at him. I wasn't especially surprised to learn he was in debt with the Takasato Gumi. It would certainly explain why they always sent their goons over here. I had been avoiding him ever since I caught him burning my stuff. He was doing his best to keep me from my past. Setting aside the issue of right or wrong, I could at least understand where he was coming from. After all, the mere sound of my old name had made me pass out. Fujieda was right. This rabbit hole went deeper than I realized.
今日はもう帰るね。
Ray looked up at the clock and smiled wearily.
俺は朝まで1階にいるから、何かあったら呼んでくれ。
Taku smiled awkwardly as he spoke.
ちゃんと休んでね。とは。おやすみなさい。
And then they left the room. Now I was alone. I took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling. Sakuragi Haruto. When I heard it, I felt something inside me shift. But I couldn't put my finger on what. And right now, I was tired of thinking. Same. Same. Ignoring the restlessness in my chest, I slowly closed my eye and shut out the world. It's such a massive same right there. Because my body knew sleep would lead to nightmares, I found myself waking every 30 minutes. Before I knew it, I'd slept well into the afternoon of the next day. As I listened absently to the voice on TV, I learned that today was New Year's Day. But I had no sentimental feelings about the start of another year. I got out of bed, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of booze. As I took the cold alcohol, I started to feel a bit better. Bottle in hand, I sat down on the sofa and lit a cigarette. Now that I thought about it, I hadn't had a smoke in quite a while. Took a long deep drag until it filled my lungs, then slowly exhaled. As I zoned out on the sofa, drinking and smoking, there came a knock at the door.
よく眠れたか。
In walked Fujieda. This time he was dressed in a business suit and wearing his glasses. He looked at me and frowned. Wait, he looked? I think that's supposed to be at me. Okay. and frowned.
もう飲んでいるのか。
悪いか。
I exhaled, crushed my cigarette in the ashtray, and purposely chugged the booze as loud as I could.
酒でも飲まないとやってられないんだよ。
Well,
好きにすればいい。
he glanced around the dimly lit room, then walked to the window and raised the blinds all the way. Ah, my retinas. Sorry. Sorry. Oh man. Normally I never open the blinds. The bright midday sun streamed into the room, making me squint. Then he opened the window, and a breeze rolled in.
何やってる？
この部屋は空気がこもっていて暗い。換気をした方がいい。
Literally polar opposites, literally.
は？
I wanted to protest, but it was so blindingly bright, I flopped face down on the sofa. I could feel the wind ruffling my hair as it completed its circuit through the room.
くそ。
吸血鬼か何かなのか、君は。あ、イメージと合っているとは思うが。
It sounded like a joke, but he said it with a perfectly straight face. Then he glanced at his wristwatch.
昨日。
I raised my head a few inches off the sofa and spoke sluggishly.
撃たれたことをタクにわざわざ言った理由は？タクが高里組をけしかけたとでも思ってるのか？
You can never be too sure.
まさか、そこまでは思っていない。
じゃあなんでだ？
His stoic eyes bored into me through the lenses of his glasses.
彼は高里組とつながっている。連中の容赦のなさを今一度伝えておいた方がいいと思っただけだ。
高里組と縁を切れって？
それが最も良い選択だが、あとは本人次第だ。口で言うほど簡単ではないからな。
He looked back at his watch.
もうすぐ待ち合わせの時間だ。出かける準備をしてくれ。
わざわざ迎えに来たのかよ。
Yeah.
ああ。昨日はかなり体調が悪そうだったからな。それに、君ならば寝過ごす可能性も十分にあるだろう。
I couldn't really argue with that, because it's true. With a sigh, I pushed myself up into a sitting position. The body felt heavy, and this blinding sunlight was sapping my energy. Maybe I was a vampire.
早く準備をしろ。
わかってるよ。
Just then, I heard the wail of an ambulance. It steadily grew louder until it was right outside. I rose from the sofa, walked to the window, and peeked out. Two paramedics hopped out of the ambulance and carried a loaded stretcher in the direction of our clinic. The victim appeared to be female. An ominous feeling rose up in my chest. I shot a look at Fujieda. I told you the moment you tried to go meet with her. Gone. He frowned as he followed my gaze outside.
今の救急車は？
クリニックに運ばれた。担架に女が乗ってた。
女性が？
Then Taku's words replayed in my head.
高里組はマヤさんのことを隠したがってる。あんたの動き次第でその女性にも危険が及ぶかもしれない。
Fujieda must have come to the same conclusion. He headed straight for the door, and I followed suit. Downstairs in the waiting room, I spotted Taku racing down the hall. Then he saw us and walked over.
急患だ。女性が撃たれた。
知り合いかもしれない。
At this, his face stiffened.
第二処置室だ。
We followed after Taku and his fluttering lab coat all the way to the elevator. We found Ray standing inside the medical ward on the second floor.
トワ藤枝さんもどうしたの？タクから連絡があって急いで来たんだけど。
今運ばれてきた患者が知り合いかもしれない。
え？
念のために確認させてもらいたい。
ええ、どうぞ。
Overwhelmed by Fujieda's urgency, Ray nodded meekly. Together, Fujieda and I approached the patient's bed. Sure enough, it was Asagawa. Took to be unconscious. Her clothes were stained red in the shoulder.
長谷川さん。
At this, Taku looked over.
知り合いか？
今日話を聞くことになっていた女性です。
This is why you don't wait. You wait and they get knocked off. Anger filled Taku's eyes, and his smoke thrashed.
救急隊員が目撃者から聞いた話によると、撃たれて倒れたらしい。銃弾は右肩を貫通している。命に別状はないが。犯人については、おそらくあんたが一番よくわかってるんだろうな。
He spoke in a flat, emotionless voice as he worked.
外で待っています。
Fujieda muttered quietly, with a pointed look in my direction. Together, we stepped out of the room. An hour later.
終わったぞ。話がしたいそうだ。
She's gonna be like, you know what? Taking back my offer. I don't want to talk to you no more. The door opened and a surly-looking Taku walked out. Fujieda and I walked into the medical ward and approached Hasegawa's bed. Her shoulder was now wrapped up in white bandages. Her complexion was still pale, but her eyes were now opened faintly. Slowly, weakly, she turned to look at Fujieda.
長谷川さん。話はできますか？もし辛いようなら無理はしないでください。
Hasegawa nodded slightly, eyes unfocused.
大丈夫です。
She wheezed like she could scarcely breathe.
無理に話さない方が。
いいえ、本当に大丈夫です。話をさせてください。
Her chapped lips parted as she struggled to speak.
私を撃ったのは高里組です。今回は運よく助かったけれど、次は本当に殺されるかもしれない。だからその前に話しておきたいことがあるんです。
Everyone in the room waited for her to continue.
私は高里組に返せないほどの借金を作ってしまいました。それでシエロで働くことになったんです。私が勤務するお店にマヤさんがいました。マヤさんは組長のお気に入りということで、周りからも一目置かれていました。私は普通に働いていただけだったんですが、ある日なぜか榊さんから声がかかったんです。マヤさんのサポートをしろと。借金は帳消しにすると言われました。ただし これから先どんなことがあったとしても絶対に他言無用だと、そうきつく言われて、最初は何が何だか分かりませんでした。でも借金がなくなるならと思って、それでマヤさんのサポートをすることになったんです。でも想像すらしていませんでした。まさかそれがあんなことになるなんて。誰にも言えなくてずっと苦しかった。罪悪感が消えなくて押しつぶされそうでした。
She paused to let out a shaky sob.
何があったんですか？
At this, she averted her eyes hesitantly.
ユーフォリアは一見普通の会員制クラブで通っていました。でも実はその裏で公にできない身分の人たちを対象に特殊な趣味を扱っていたんです。
特殊な趣味？
マヤさんは客の本当の幸せを演出するための店なんだと言っていました。でも実際は客の歪んだ欲望を晴らすための狂った店でした。
See what I tell you? She was doing the exact same thing Towa is doing right now.
歪んだ欲望って。
ありとあらゆる要望に応えるための準備もされていました。未成年もいましたし、顧客は政治家、高級官僚、海外からのゲスト、そういった方々でした。
そこであなたは何を？
私はマヤさんのサポートといってもただの雑用係だったので、その直接的な行為には一切関わっていません。それでもあの時榊さんの誘いに簡単に乗ってしまったことを今でも後悔しています。とても言葉にできないような光景や、本当にいろいろなことがあって、とても
She faltered, her expression twisted in pain. The longer she talked, the sicker I started to feel. I had no sentimental attachment to Maya, so this revelation didn't impact me much. And yet, at the same time, I felt a strange weight deep in my chest, suffocating me. Not only that, Hasegawa's description of my mother seemed to be at odds with everything I'd heard about her thus far. The image I had of her didn't match this nefarious business tycoon. Told you. Did Takasawa Togumi force her into it? Curious about Fujieda's reaction, I looked over and quickly realized something was amiss. His usual composure was gone, replaced with a deeply furrowed brow and tightly pursed lips. I'd never seen him look so distressed.
そこには少年や少女もいたのか？
Yeah, probably. He asked in a strangled voice.
はい。
柚木芽衣という名前の少女知らないか？
名前まではちょっと。
Hasegawa shook her head guiltily. Yuzuki Mei. Was that the name of his friend's missing sister? As the blood drained from his face, Fujieda pulled his old memo pad from his coat pocket. Then he withdrew a photograph tucked between the pages and held it up for Hasegawa to see. Her eyes promptly widened.
知っているのか？
この子、 いました。覚えてます。他の子たちが日に日に生気を失っていく中でずっと強い意志を持ち続けていたというか、そんな風に私には見えたので。
Fujieda's fingers trembled as he held the photo.
それで彼女は
マヤさんがとても気に入っていた男の子がいて、彼女はその子といつも一緒にいました。二人とも綺麗な子だったので、セットで人気があったというか。でも二人で逃げ出そうとしたみたいで、連れ戻されているところを見ました。
それから
それから男の子の方は店で見たんですけど、女の子は見かけなくなりました。
Fujieda pulled out his cell phone and showed something to Hasegawa.
これに見覚えは。
She gazed at the screen and paused, trying to remember.
このぬいぐるみ、見たことがあります。その女の子が持っていたぬいぐるみに似ているような気がします。
そうか。
At this, Fujieda lowered the phone as if in defeat. What did she say just now? Stuffed toy? I swallowed my saliva as my condition sharply worsened. Fujieda must have shown Hasegawa a photo of the bunny toy, which proved that he was the one who took it from my apartment.
マヤさんのお店のことは高里組がずっと隠し続けています。マヤさんが亡くなった後、榊さんに店のことは絶対に誰にも言うなと念を押されました。私もずっと高里組に監視されていて、心安らぐ日なんてありませんでした。昨日あなたがバイト先へ来た時もマヤさんの話をするつもりはなくて、でも
Her brow was etched deeply with anguish.
初めて第三者からマヤさんについて聞かれて、当時のことを思い返したら、私は自分が思っている以上に後悔しているということに気がついたんです。たくさんの子供たちが物のように扱われて傷つけられて、それを私は黙って見ていた。自分の身に何が起こるかわからないから怖くて言いなりになっていた。あの店のことを暴いてほしいとは言いません。相手は高里組ですから。でも独りよがりだと分かっていても、せめて誰かに話したくて。話したところで許されるとも思っていませんし、懺悔にすらならないことも分かっています。それでも一人で抱えていくにはあまりにも辛かった。
She let out a muffled sob. As her shoulders shook, Taku quietly reached out to her.
少し休んだ方がいい。
He and Ray watched over her with mournful looks on their faces. Meanwhile, all emotion had vanished from Fujieda's expression. That brief glimpse of distress had disappeared behind a blank slate, albeit one too pale to pass as stoic.
今日はもうここまでにしよう。
Taku spoke sharply, then approached Fujieda and lowered his voice.
あんた分かってるのか。これは見せしめだ。高里組は彼女を簡単に殺すことができる。なのにこうしてわざと生かしてここへ運び込ませた理由。
But Fujieda didn't answer. Instead, he headed for the door. I started to follow after him. However,
おい
Towa!
My body failed to cooperate, and my vision tilted sideways. Taku and Ray dashed over and caught me before I fell.
やだ、Towa。すごい汗。
レイ、長谷川さんを見ていてくれ。俺はトアを部屋へ連れて行く。
わかった。
Taku put my arm around his shoulders and started walking slowly. Through the haze of my mind, I could see a flickering image of a little girl. She looked at me and smiled. Sat face to face in the red room. She beamed from ear to ear as she took my hand in both of hers. Her hands were so warm, it nearly made me smile too. She was wearing a pretty dress, and she was very happy about it. Likewise, I was wearing fancy clothes too. We matched, she seemed to say. Just then, a red fissure shot through my vision. Everything in my sight was splattered with red paint. When it cleared away, the girl was sobbing. Someone had grabbed her by the hand and was leading her away from me. There, in the empty space she left behind. Lay a forgotten plush. Damn. My god. I don't know how to feel. I really don't know how to feel. Oh my god. I awoke from the nightmare slick with sweat. Slowly I sat up. For once, I actually remembered what had happened. After all, it matched what Hasegawa had told us. Deep down, I had a feeling I would dream about it. I looked around the quiet room and attempted to wake up. The damp smell drew my attention to the window. I could hear a trickling sound beyond the closed blinds. Apparently it was raining. Then I looked up at the clock ticking soundlessly on the dark wall. I felt like I'd slept for days, but in reality, not much time had passed. I rose from the sofa and left the room without even pulling my coat on. I could only hope the rain would wash away this miserable mood. As I passed by the second floor, on the way down the stairs, I heard sounds coming from the medical ward. I figured Taku was probably treating Hasegawa, so I kept walking. Damn, she's probably not being treated. Beads of rain fell from the dark, stagnant sky, soaking my whole body in an instant. My waterlogged clothes grew heavy and clung to my skin, and my hair stuck to my face, but I didn't care. I set off down the empty street. As I wandered aimlessly, I spotted the park up ahead. The sight of the abandoned playground equipment was almost tragic in a way. I wandered into the park, crossing the muddy earth. I was headed to the concrete tunnel just up ahead. Whenever I hid myself in there, FUJIEDA would come find me. It had happened twice now, and on both occasions it was raining. When I reached the tunnel entrance, I crouched down. Thought it was empty, but in fact someone was curled up inside. He was wearing a business suit, and his wet coat lay balled up next to him. It was Fujieda. Damn, they really are alike. He sensed my presence and looked up at me. His polished glasses were dotted with raindrops, and his usually tidy hair was sticking to his forehead. His expression was utterly zombified. Fujieda looked at me, his pale lips parted. Yeah. Oh, the little girl. His voice was so quiet, I wasn't sure he was even talking to me.
何がおとなしいだ。全く逆の極悪非道な悪女じゃないか。
He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He seemed to be talking to himself.
妹はただ普通に生きていただけだった。何の罪も犯してはいない。なのに気の触れた獣どもの醜い性欲を満たすためにそんなくだらない理由で
Ooh. Out of nowhere, he lunged at me. Huh, kind of like just your first meeting. Wow, look at the two of you, bonding. I landed on the wet ground, flat on my back. The impact made me squeeze my eyes shut. And when I opened it, Fujieda's twisted grimace was right in front of me. His eyes were filled with seething rage, the likes of which I'd never seen. Idly, it occurred to me that this was the first time I'd seen him express his emotion. He punched me hard in the face. And then a second time, and a third. My vision swam. After a few more punches, he stopped and growled down at me. His eyes glinted darkly as the rain poured down on us.
お前たちみたいな最低の奴らがいるから妹はお前たちのせいで
Roaring, he put both hands around my neck. As he crushed my windpipe, I gasped for air. He wasn't playing around. Of course not, Towa. It's not. He was intentionally trying to kill me. His grip was tight, and with his weight pinning me down, I had no hope of escape. So my only option was to just die. Admittedly, a sudden, pointless death was exactly the kind of death I deserved. With that thought, I slowly closed my eye. My oxygen levels depleted further and further, and I gasped for breath. But as I was waiting to lose consciousness, the chokehold loosened. Confused, I opened my eye. Fujieda stared down at me mournfully. Was that rainwater streaming down his face? Or...
お前を殺したところで妹は戻ってこないだから謝れお前たちの食い物になった犠牲者に謝れよ
He choked the words out, his lips trembling. But I didn't respond. I just gazed back at him. silence seemed to piss him off. White hot fury flared up in his eyes.
な、どうすればお前はもっと苦しむ。何をすればいい。
As I maintained my silence, he pulled his hands away from my neck and leaned in close.
殺すなんてお前にとっちゃ生ぬるいだろう。どうすればもっと痛めつけられるんだ。お前よ。
Growling, he put his hand on my clothes. Then, out of nowhere, he hiked my shirt up, exposing my chest. Cold rainwater dripped onto my bare skin. Fujieda sneered down at me in contempt, then grabbed me by the shoulders and flipped me onto my stomach. Water splashed as my face hit the mud. Oh. Okay. This is your idea of hurting me. Triple. This is not gonna hurt him in the slightest. But in the rain, in the mud? Oh god. Right. This was my favorite feeling in the world. As my body shook, I felt my lips curl into a tiny smile. Right, this is not suffering for him. Our bodies were touching, but what we both felt was something very different. If I had to guess, Fujieda was probably trying to traumatize me. But if so, he was making a huge mistake, which is very true. Oh, if only he knew. I could only imagine how good it would feel to punch each other right now. Sorry. I fantasized about it as the pain tore through me from the inside out. Yeah? He relinquished his grip on my hips, and I collapsed to the ground. I watched the raindrops hit the ground as I listened to the rhythmic drumming. Is Fujieda satisfied now? Was that all it took? As my fuzzy mind melted in the rain, I slowly closed my eye. What was that? Oh, wait, it has a little bit of color now. Oh, I like that. But this is where we're gonna stop for today. Well, a lot of truths I did not expect to learn today. Okay, so essentially I was on the right track, that what Maya was doing That's essentially what Towa is currently doing. Letting people experience their dark desires. I mean, if you actually think about it, maybe it was kind of like his... Is it unconscious or subconscious? One of those. And it's like it was basically ingrained in him since childhood. So his body and mind are probably just like, you know, this is what we know and that's what it wants. I don't know how to put it into words, but like surely you get what I'm trying to get at, right? Yeah. And so then apparently his sister is not even his sister. So he probably saw her as one. But it turns out that girl was actually Fujieda's sister. So that means his last name is actually Yuzuki. Okay. What else did we learn? Oh, yeah, it was pretty much also like what I figured, that they were essentially like keeping her business on the hush-hush. It's like, how could like nobody like know that she had a business? Yeah, it's also kind of like with Sakaki, he was saying, oh yeah, you know, she's like this nice, quiet, pleasant lady, and I'm out here like reading like the stuff we had before, and I'm like, no? That's kind of weird that you recall her like this, a nice, quiet, pleasant lady, when she was letting like this unholy shit happen to her son. I literally have no words, man. I have no words. At this point, his absent father was a better parent than Maya ever was. I know that's crazy to say, but like, you literally sit there and think about it. Yeah. God. Well, we're stopping here for today, and hopefully the next video will be finished, but again, I won't hold my breath because it is the last chapter. A lot of stuff to uncover, so it might be 2 more videos, I don't know, but we'll see. But thank you guys for watching the video. If you liked it, obviously give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying my content, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!